All right, well, welcome everyone. It is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025, and we are here in the Athens-Clarke County City Hall for our monthly agenda setting session. Thanks everybody for hanging on 2 days. Hope everybody didn't do too much slipping and sliding. For longtime City Hall watchers, this is our old slot. Once upon a time, we did agenda setting sessions the Thursday after the third Tuesday of the month. Just to make things interesting. So here we're back in that time slot. We'll begin with a recitation of our civility pledge, as we always do. That indicates that the way we govern ourselves is often as important as the positions we take. Our collective decisions will be better when differing views have had the opportunity to be fully vetted and considered. All people have the right to be treated with respect, courtesy, and openness. We value all input, and we commit to conduct ourselves at all times with civility and courtesy to each other. So for everybody here gathered, or those who are watching through our variety of digital platforms, if business is not concluded by 8:15, there will be a 15-minute break. There are going to be several opportunities for public input tonight. There will be an opportunity on the consent agenda. There will be separate opportunities on each of the 5 planning and zoning items, and there will be an opportunity on old and new business. Each of these opportunities for public input will provide a 3-minute opportunity for members of the public who would like to provide some input. You see a light in front of the clerk. That light will turn green when you begin speaking, yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when your 3 minutes has concluded. And I will thank you for your time with us. In each opportunity for public input, please make sure you give us your name and let us know the item to which you're speaking, and just give us your place of residence, if you would. Just city is fine. So before we move the consent agenda public input, I just want to ask members of the commission, would anybody like to remove any of these consent agenda items from the agenda for discussion, even if you want to put it back on consent tonight? And again, consent items are 1 through 5 tonight.
I have a question, point of clarification. If we pull it off of consent for tonight, does that preclude us from being able to do that at the voting meeting?
No, I'll ask the same question at the voting meeting.
Okay.
And so if you want to leave something on consent tonight, but some kind of observations occur to you between now and then, by all means, you can pull it off for discussion then too.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing none from the commission, I'll move to the public. Is there any member of the public who would like to provide input on items on the consent agenda? Again, those are items 1 through 5. Burning thoughts or questions? All right, given the crickets out here in City Hall tonight, we're going to move on to our planning and zoning session for the evening, which means that I will relocate, screen will come down, and Planning Director Bruce Lonnie will introduce these one at a time, and then we'll follow with any public input one at a time on these and commission discussion. Thanks for everybody's patience while the screen fires up. Look at that. And in fact, it looks like technology is our friend tonight.
That's right.
Bruce, what are we going to start with?
All right. We have a handful of items this evening that are coming to you from the Planning Commission with recommendations. The first one on the agenda is a master plan development submittal for 2 properties known as 1280 Oconee Street and 300 Ann Street. The request is to take these 2 properties, one of which is currently zoned RM1 and one of which is CG, and rezone those, the RM one going to RM2, the CG relatively staying CG, and I'll tell you why it's relative here in a minute, but to have a plan development on it, so with the binding report and binding plan. There is a future land use boundary shift to help accommodate this request. So when this comes to you for the voting session, you will have 2 votes, one for the future land use, one for the rezone PD request. The development proposal includes 2 commercial buildings that would sit toward Oconee Street. They have just under 7,500 square feet of space, have some outdoor patio area. There are 6 duplexes that are 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath for each of those units. There is one standalone residential unit, which you'll see on the site plan here, that's a 4-bedroom, 4.5 bath. And then there are 66 surface parking spaces, and then the proposition for 11 on-street spaces along the Ann Street frontage. The applicant asked for 3 waivers. The Planning Commission recommends support of all 3, and we'll walk through those later in the presentation. So location map, this is an aerial that shows where this is. The 2 parcels are situated. They're on the south side of the Oconee Street right-of-way. You see the loop interchange there on the right-hand side of the screen with the park and ride, just to get you oriented. The current future land use is represented here as well as the change. So that line, we've put a black arrow there showing you where that new line would shift. So there would be less Main Street business and more of the mixed-density residential that would align with the aspects of this development, where the residential is located, where's the commercial located. That line would shift to respond to the binding site plan. And then that's a little more clearly depicted here, I think, with the rezone request. So the image on the right is what would result if this were approved. Some photographs of the property. Some of you may remember when this building was built, it was the Edwards Pharmacy. It then turned into a variety of other uses, a restaurant, it was appliance sales, most recently before it was vacated. There was a good bit of parking that was provided with this when Mr. Edwards built it, and that padded area to the right was always anticipated to be some other type of development down the line, and it never materialized. Good bit of construction in this area, as we're all aware, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Access into and out of the site is a logistical issue that the design is trying to work through. This is into the site and looking at Ann Street, and the topography, the site's relatively table flat until you get to the very rear, and it steps up pretty dramatically up to the Ann Street right-of-way. So the finished grade of that roadbed sits about 1.5 stories, and I'm using those terms on purpose, above the graded area here. And this is looking from Ann Street back into the site. That flash of red that you see through the trees is the roof of the Edwards Pharmacy building, the existing commercial structure. And this is Ann Street. So on the right-hand side, this is looking west. On the right-hand side is where those on-street spaces would be accommodated. During the Planning Commission's deliberation on this, there was public comment about providing on-street parking on the opposite side of Ann Street, or yellow curbing it. And the request was specifically to yellow curb it. That would be a separate issue. If some of you are aware of that request, that would take a different action by the Mayor and Commission. And we've advised that property owner and their representative to initiate that through Transportation and Public Works. So we can talk about that later if you wish. Here's the site plan that would become binding upon approval. The commercial buildings are at the top of the screen, the 2 footprints for those. Parking down the center and at the rear there is Ann Street. There's a pedestrian connection in the lower right-hand corner that would allow for residents or folks wanting to pass through the site to come from Ann down through the site or vice versa. This was a particular topic of discussion with the Planning Commission to provide connectivity to the Greenway, which is at the opposite end of Ann Street. And this is the architecture that would become binding. Building 100 on the right, on the left, building 200 on the right. That's what would front Oconee Street. Those 3-bed, 3.5 bath units are represented here. And then the single residential unit, that 4-bed, 4.5 bath, is this structure. Okay. Planning Commission also entertained these 3 waiver requests. The first one being a reduction of conserved canopy from 20.3%, which would normally be required, to 6.66%. There was concern about that. And in that deliberation, what was depicted was the overall canopy requirement will be met with the new plantings. But in order to accommodate the pedestrian access, the on-street parking on Ann Street, and the development footprints, the hardwoods that are on there would come out. There's not any other conservable canopy on the site. As you can see from the pictures, it's been cleared and graded. So the trees are on the edge, and ultimately, after discussion, the Planning Commission recommended support of the waiver. with the understanding that the total canopy percentage would be met. Second waiver is to waive the requirement for at least 50% of those residential buildings to face a public or private street. The way this property is oriented, plus the topographical issues at Ann Street, that was a very difficult standard to meet. And even if they did front Ann Street somehow, it would not have represented 50% of the residential buildings, just because it is a longer, narrower site. Third waiver request is regarding the requirement for a building within 75 feet of a public or private street to include front entry porches. That's kind of related to the fact that those units won't be facing Ann Street, and the residential is not going to be pulled up to Oconee Street, the commercial will be. So they're asking for that ability to waive that requirement. There would be the connectivity, however, through that pedestrian access to all the units. So Planning Commission's recommendation, based on the fact that the request is compatible with the comp plan, compatible with future land use and the zoning map, and that this site does represent some significant redevelopment potential, they recommended approval and also voiced their support for the infill design that this represents and the location where it's attempted to be achieved. All of this and the staff report touched on the logistical challenges. The fact is, this will be a site that almost certainly is a right in, right out. And its access being entirely from the GDOT right-of-way, coordination with the state will have to occur. But that's a known quantity for what they're trying to do here, and they feel like the site still functions even with a right in, right out configuration. And that concludes the staff report.
Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate it. Any member of the public here to speak to this? Step right up. And just, again, give us your name and place of residence.
Yeah. Brett A. from the Studio Being Architects, 200 Plum Valley. Thank you, Bruce, for that introduction. Really, we're kind of excited to be able to bring a tiny little infill project like this. Client came to us and said, I want to do something nice here. This, family piece of property, and let's see what we can do. And we did look at, can we put something along Ann Street, but with the airport overlay and the height requirements and so on there. By the time we did that, we were going to be way too tall and all parking in the middle. So we looked at this little pocket neighborhood approach supported by a commercial in the front, and we felt like if we can create this little neighborhood vibe where everybody's got a really nice front porch, we're set back from the parking a little bit. I think you have the packages where you can see our 3D perspectives and so on. You can hopefully tell that we've got 14.5-foot wide patios, 9 feet deep, that are a couple of steps up with planters. That it's really inviting. We're trying to include everybody rather than a lot of developments put everybody inside or down a hallway or what have you. We're trying to make little homes here. So we have front and back patios like that. We do have that 16 to 17-foot grade on the back of up against Ann Street. So we're proposing, we've got to kind of complete the cut. Right now it's about a 45-degree angle. We're just kind of lean it back a little more. And the idea is to make kind of a green wall back there. And hopefully you can see that in your images as well. With about a 4-foot base retaining wall that's full of plants that can trail down and vine up. And the top of the wall we plant lushly and let it trail down as well. And speaking with Commissioner Meyer, the development team is able to add some EV charging stations, some level 2 along that back wall for the residents as well. So the idea is that we can create this nice little residential pocket and some supporting commercial, and hopefully this helps kind of invigorate this area. It's already gotten a little bit of attention across the street, and with all this connectivity with the Greenway and the Firefly Trail and such a close proximity, walkable, bikeable to town, we're hoping you guys see it this way too. We feel like this is a really good opportunity for a nice infill. Maybe it sparks similar type of developments that'll further enhance town. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Nate. Is there anyone else here to speak to this item? All right, given the ever-shifting lines of districts, this is now in District 8. Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, was able to listen to this during the Planning Commission meeting and have communicated in a couple of emails with Mr. Nave, the architect. Like he said, I talked to him about the whole sort of sustainable infill part of this and how it's contributing to this kind of creating housing where people can use all sorts of modes of transportation. And so I was really pleased that they were very open to adding EV chargers in there. I'll probably do something with the planning department. I was talking to Bruce yesterday about this so that we can put that into a CDO so that it's there if anything happens to the PD going forward, if it changes hand and such. But I'm really excited about it. I have a question looking at this now and thinking about this and just having come through this corridor, that right in, right out kind of thing. How is it physically, like, how are cars kept from turning left there? Because it's going to be really tempting coming out of there, if you want to go downtown, to turn left, because otherwise, like to get to the university, you'd be turning right, turning left and left around, or getting onto the bypass, going down to College Station. So, I mean, is there a physical barrier? Because that corridor there is so tight with cars coming along here. I was just kind of curious how we actually keep people from turning left onto to Oconee Street. Can anyone help me with that one?
Yeah, that is going to be the focus of the coordination with GDOT, to be honest with you. The design for the work that's going on there now does not involve any kind of median, curbed median like you see in some sections of that project. Whether it turns into a signage situation only, or it's a directional curb line, or the pork chop, for lack of a better way to put it, that sometimes is put to direct traffic, so it's very inconvenient to hang a left.
Right, you mean a physical, the concrete?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There will be some design component of this that we fully anticipate will have to be coordinated with GDOT.
And are there, for that, and you might not know the answer to this, are there sort of, you're coming out to a road that's 4 or 5 lanes, and in a case like that, you would have to have a physical barrier there, the pork chop,
Yeah.
rather than just a painted.
Correct. Yeah. Paint's not going to get the job done. So the district engineer is going to weigh in on that as
Okay.
we move forward. But there just really is no good way for everything that we know to make a left hand out of there to accommodate that. So it's going to have to be restricted in some way.
Thinking about that road grid, at least you've got Grove Street immediately adjacent where you could take a right.
True.
And then
True.
get to Poplar Street if you wanted to go, say, directly to downtown.
It's a little messy right now, so it's hard to even see that turn into Grove Street. I don't even know if you're able to do that right this second.
Anything further before I move to Commissioner
No,
Davenport?
I'm good.
Yeah, Commissioner Davenport.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm like, sorry, been screaming all day. So I do have some concerns about the on-street parking at Ann Street, because it's a mostly residential area, low income, and that will be the only spot where there'll be on-street parking. And it's kind of like in the middle of Ann Street before it turns into Milburn Avenue. But I will be talking with the architects as well as Dr. Myers about that as well, or the designers. And is it possible to do a CDO ensuring a right in, right out, and not a pork chop? Because we're going to be voting on this in 2 weeks, and I just want to make sure that that's a very heavily used intersection. And people should use Groove Street, but you never know what people are going to do.
Yes, you could.
Okay.
Yep.
So Myers,
We
I'll
can
work
work
on you on
together.
that.
I know this is sort of out of turn, but I will follow up with, about that on the concerns about the on-street parking and the yellow curbing as well. I forgot to mention that.
And finally, the height. So this is a very wooded area. You're entering the green zone or the green belt, or what I like to consider the green belt. Even with the 17-foot in the back with the parking, it looks like the height of these buildings are gonna supersede the trees. So if you aesthetically look down Oak Street, everything is below the tree line, and this complex appears to be above the tree line. It's definitely gonna be above, the gas station, the liquor store, and all the other surrounding buildings in that area. And I guess it's called the little triangle tilt. Do that really have to be that high at that angle?
Does the roof line have to be at that slope?
Yeah.
Perhaps the applicant could respond to that, but as far as the building height there, one thing to note is what they're proposing is less than what zoning would allow as a maximum.
Because of the overlay.
Yep, and that building height, Mr. Nave noted, I mean, this is in the airport overlay, so this is something that the airport authority has looked at, and they were comfortable with that height from an operational standpoint at the airport. Your concerns sound
Aesthetic.
more about aesthetic
Yeah.
and context.
Did you want any response from the applicant, or did you want?
Yes.
Mr. Nave, I don't know if you have any thoughts about the,
Thank you. I don't believe it's taller than the tree lines. The property just adjacent, if your back's to Oconee, is full of trees. And the portion that we're able to keep, the conserved canopy is, from that perspective, is in the back left. Those trees are somewhat mature, and these buildings are in the 34-foot height. I believe most of those trees are, yeah, can you pick up one of those pictures for me? In our renderings, we're showing new trees, and maybe that is throwing you off a little bit in what you're seeing, because we're showing younger, the planted trees. But in the background, you had a site image, Bruce. Yeah, so back up one. That's probably good enough, because that give you a sense, that hillside where you see the base of those mobile homes in the back there, that's about 15 or 16 feet. That's half the height of the buildings that we have proposed currently. And pardon me, we're actually, where you see the grass line hit that hill, to make all of this work, we kind of have to slice a foot or so out of that as well. So it might just be poor presentation showing you the new trees and not picking up the old trees, but I believe we're well underneath the trees, mature tree height. So
All right, thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sir.
thank you. Anything else, Commissioner?
I'm
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I think this is a nice project, and I really like the design with the sloped roof profile. It does give a kind of more traditional vibe instead of these kind of boxy, flat face, flat roof structures that we seem to be getting more often. And I appreciate the front porch element of this. And the EV, thanks, Dr. Myers, for bringing that up. I'd be interested in assuring that there's also the ability to charge small electric vehicles, like scooters and bikes, particularly because this is right there on the Greenway, and it's a real easy EV scoot to East Campus from this location. For anybody who might work or have classes on that end of campus, rather than dealing with the whole hot mess of Oconee Street, it would be a real easy trek on the Greenway. But I know there's concerns with people bringing their EVs indoors and charging them. So if we could work some kind of requirement to make sure there's the ability to charge those small vehicles outside on the porches with some kind of lockable, small little bike lock at each unit. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see us start making that a requirement for all residential development.
Anything else, Commissioner? Nothing else? Commissioner Wright?
Thank you. This is really interesting. Can we go back to the picture that's got the other side, Ann Street, because the density of the whole block on the left of the, I guess they're probably grandfathered in units there, and you're saying the terrain from this curb for this project is straight up in that part, straight down.
From Ann Street, it goes down into
It's,
the
okay,
site.
it's the down thing.
Exactly.
So, and that's what's keeping there from being a vehicle
Yeah.
driveway here, which is unfortunate. But I get it. We don't, So my concern is down at the very end, the fire hydrant. And so it's at a parking spot in the design, and it's so dense back there, as you can see the apartment complex at the end, at the 90-degree turn, as well as what's coming in. That fire hydrant seems to me like it should be in a protected way, and not a parking spot.
That'll have to be accommodated. Yeah.
Okay.
If a parking spot's going to be there, they will be moving the hydrant to an approved location, but my guess is the hydrant is not going to be affected, that their parking will stop short, and the site plan will have to respond to
Yeah,
that.
okay. So that'll be covered as it moves down the,
Yep.
okay, thanks.
Anything else? All right, we'll move on to item number 7.
Okay. All right, this item is at 218 North Avenue. This is a rezone request being brought by the property owner, working with B&A Architecture and, I believe, Pittman Engineering. The request is to rezone from commercial neighborhood, CN, to RM3. Future land use would remain unchanged. It's Main Street business. Both of those zones are deemed compatible with Main Street business future land use. This is a non-binding plan as proposed. 8 structures were shown, 228 bedrooms arranged across those 8 structures. There's a clubhouse with an amenity area, and there are 218 surface parking spaces. The location is worth noting that it's less than a half-mile connection to the Greenway and Walker Park. This is an aerial view of the property. So on the short side of this lot, it's North Avenue. On the south side of this property, I believe that is Strickland. This property has been historically either a mobile home park, but over the years, those single wides were replaced with RVs or campers. The property owners, this has been held in family control for as long as we have record, and it is that same family that is representing and participating in this submittal. So looking at the future land use, here you see the Main Street business, not just for this parcel, but for this intersection. The thinking here, when this was done 25 years ago, was that this might become a node of sorts at North Avenue and Strickland. Over time, we've seen this turn into a variety of things, but it hasn't really evolved into that commercial center. Here's the zoning that's being requested from CN, which supported that commercial function at that corner, to the RM3 that's being requested. And RM3, just worth noting, that is the up to 50 beds per acre. And that zoning, although they're not using every bed per acre that RM3 would allow, our RM2 did not provide enough to get to the number that they were seeking. So here's some photographs of the site looking from the intersection of North and Strickland. This is looking north on North Avenue, and this is looking west, kind of northwest, along Strickland. And there in the right-hand side of the view, you can see the homestead, the family home. Here is the site plan that has been submitted as a concept. I will note there was considerable discussion at the Planning Commission meeting about the effort that went into this concept. This is a fairly detailed concept. They spent a good bit of time trying to make sure that the rezone request could be accommodated on the parcel. And there was a good bit of attention also given to the architecture of these structures. So looking at these properties, this was the building that would be proposed for the center of the site. I wish you could see my cursor, but you can't. That main block in the center. And then there's a handful of other structures that you see here that are arranged throughout the site. Planning Commission's recommendation was approval with a condition. They found that this was compatible with the 23 comprehensive plan. It represents new housing. It's appropriate infill. It's adjacent to a variety of transportation options. It's compatible with future land use map and zoning map. Recognizing that this is a non-binding request, staff introduced the notion that the representative architecture be incorporated as proposed And the Planning Commission supported that idea because they also agreed that this was an example of quality infill design on a revitalizing corridor. So the condition that was arrived at by the Planning Commission is as follows: that the architectural design intent as depicted in the applicant's submission shall be binding with regards to mass, scale, materials, and general fenestration. The word that's not included there that we often see included is arrangement. So the applicant, during discussion, expressed a desire to be able to move the buildings around if the grading needs to respond to the actual placement of the buildings. But the notion here is that the massing and scale of those structures, the materials used, and fenestration, meaning the openings for the windows and the doors, that we wouldn't get blank walls facing the streets or neighboring properties, as depicted in the submittal, would remain binding. And from a staff standpoint, we were comfortable with this language because this is the exact same language that we use to administer our historic preservation design guidelines. This is language that we understand, and I think we could manage through the plans review process to work with this condition as worded. And that concludes the staff report.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Is there any public input on this item? Been so long.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Brett Nave, Studio B&A Architects, 200 Plum Nelly. Thank you, Bruce. You covered a lot of my talking points, so I really appreciate it. Our approach here really is this is just a perfect opportunity, intersection to create something, again, kind of invigorating. We want to design a place that feels like a neighborhood. So you're seeing these different size buildings, collections of apartment buildings down to little duplexes and even a single cottage up on the corner. We're really focusing on that porch approach again. We want to bring people outdoors, and we're focusing both directions, both inward and outward. So as you look through the other renderings that you have in your package, I hope you'll see that we kind of have two front doors. We're walking up from Strickland and from north, and we're walking up from the interior as well, hoping to encourage that neighborhood feel. We're also relying, and we do this a lot in our studio, relying on robust landscaping, because I really think that's part of what makes our neighborhoods can feel so inviting. We're looking, and Chase will talk a little bit about some of that here in a minute. But the idea with the fenestration, we're designed a lot of natural light into these units, and to bring that landscape indoors is just, to me, is a huge design element. And speaking of landscape, you guys have been talking about recently this North Avenue revitalization, and we've got a 40-foot wide Georgia Power easement along North Avenue here, and it takes the corner around the bus stop there. And in working with Commissioners Link and Thornton, we've talked a lot about what can we do here to kind of kickstart that, and our approach, and hopefully you can see it in some of these renderings, is just robust landscaping. Obviously, we can't do big trees because it's Georgia Power, but there's a lot of things you can do along those guidelines. So that's our approach there, and really we're hoping that this is another opportunity to provide an example of, from an architectural style to kind of the articulation of that style, that hopefully you see this looks maybe a little bit different. It's got kind of a hearkening to an old industrial feel, as well as scale. We're down to almost like single dwellings up to walk-up apartments, and we're hoping that we can invite all types of people with all types of needs to this location and relieve some of the burden that's being put on the nearby neighborhoods. With that, I'll thank you, and we're here for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nave. Is there anyone else here to speak to item 7? Evening.
Hey everyone, my name is Chase Lawrence and I live at 100 Cloverhurst Circle here in Athens. And if approved, I'll be one of the owners and developers of this property. And I want to start by thanking each of you. I've been in the Athens real estate market now for close to 20 years, and I know that the proposals get more and more complicated. I know the agendas are long, and it takes time to dig in and make an informed decision. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And a special thanks to Commissioners Link and Thornton, whose districts are immediately impacted by this. You've each been exceptional to work with. You're so pragmatic, and I appreciate all the time because it has been multiple meetings to arrive at this concept, and I know that that takes a lot of time as well. Anytime we take on a new project in town, I like to start by addressing a need. And then the execution of that need is to deliver something beautiful that the neighborhood can be proud of and that we can all enjoy together. And on this, the need is twofold. I'm seeing that we have a lot of extremely underutilized and oftentimes blighted land on our major corridors. And I also see that we have a lot of rental tension right now on our single-family neighborhoods. And I think that this serves twofold. I think that it's a beautification of this intersection, and I think that the landscape plan being proposed and the architecture as it steps down into these neighborhoods is a perfect fit for this corner. And then I also think that it provides a much needed relief valve for our single-family neighborhoods throughout MLK. We're seeing a lot of student renters enter these single-family neighborhoods seeking new houses, and what my company has found, when we provide something intentional and thoughtful, we can attract a wide range of rental demographics. We did this at one of our most recently completed projects, the Mill District on Barber Street. We have the widest range of renters living in that community that I've ever been a part of. We have students, grad students, young professionals, couples, and 3 retirees who actually are our most interesting, fun renters over there. And it's such a good synergy of that demographic, and I'd like to replicate that here, and I think that we can. We've proven a lot of success with that, and this is a unique situation. Also, I'm excited about the fact that we get to have an entirely local team. We have a local current property owner being able to sell to another local property owner with an entirely local set of consultants. Our architect, our civil engineer, our landscape designer, the entire management team involved, and all of our construction team will be local to this community. We all live and work here, and we have a vested interest in being proud of the projects that we deliver. And so that's really important for us. I think one of the last things I'll say is we have a current group of residents that are calling this site home. And anytime we take on a new project, I want to have a holistic approach to what our footprint is. And that includes those 12 temporary campers. These are individuals who we're already working with to help relocate. And these are also individuals we're giving a ton of grace period to help in the transition. By right, if another developer comes into the property, these individuals only have...
I apologize, your time is
Oh,
up.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, if you have other questions, I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak to item 7? Right, it's in District 2, so we'll begin with Commissioner Link.
As the applicant noted, both Commissioner Thornton and I have met with them a handful of times and had multiple communication. This is a difficult piece of property. It's this long, skinny piece of property built into the side of a hill that's zoned CN. Effectively, the only thing that could go there by right is a strip mall facing Strickland Avenue with a couple stories of apartments on top. So, it's challenging, and I think that they've come up with a really creative project here with that variety of structures and the hopes of attracting a variety of tenants, and the sensitivity to the back end of the property, with the lower profile, more traditional style buildings that are closer into the neighborhood. There's also the power cut that runs through it that chops off a whole corner of the lot. So I think it's, a really creative approach. I know that the property owner and his family are working with the residents, the folks in the RVs, and apparently there's only, I think, 2 or 3 of them that are actually permanent residents. They've been working with trying to find a way to relocate them, and I would really love to use this opportunity to give planning direction to to, do some tweaks to our code to allow RVs on, some of our larger scale, less dense residential zones. I know that there are already people living in tiny houses or RV style vehicles on some of these larger wooded properties, and I'd love us to develop some kind of special use process to allow property owners to allow that to happen legally, because it is, increasingly a very common and desirable way to live. I mean, my social media feeds are full of sweet little influencer videos of their tiny homes and trailer life, so I would hope that we could use this as an opportunity to open up that type of affordable housing in this community. I think this is a nice project. And as the applicant noted, our single-family neighborhoods are just getting swarmed with students. And if we can offer them that style of housing, close to town, close to campus, hopefully we can start to relieve some of the pressure on our single-family neighborhoods. And we also need to do a much better job of enforcing our single-family housing ordinance and giving these kids alternative places to live. But I also foresee that, this should be a property where you do have a variety of people living, and the Mill District is like that. I live just a few blocks from there, and it's a beautiful project. It's an award-winning project. This developer also did the Mathis Apartments, and those have the same similar community feel. So I think this is kind of a best-case scenario for the future development of this property, and lots coming to North Avenue. And, if we can get this kind of development that is, sensitive to the neighborhood that it butts up against and attracts that diversity of tenancy, hopefully we can kind of guide the development of that corridor so it accommodates a more diversity of our community.
Got Commissioner Taylor, and then Wright and Thornton on tap, and Commissioner Johnson. Go ahead, Commissioner Taylor.
I have a quick question. So with all of these developments that we have approved that has been geared towards young professionals, recent graduates, retirees, we've approved so many, but yet single-family neighborhoods, it still haven't alleviated the amount of student housing that is still going into single-family. So my question is, exactly how many more apartment complexes like this are we going to approve there is absolutely no place for Athenians to live in? And another comment, the fact that we're going to displace residents in RVs for more student housing to say, well, let's open up our zoning so that they can maybe live in a wooded area instead of staying in the place where they've been. I just need clarity because I'm new to this, and so, I don't really see the benefit for residents that put us and vote for us in these seats for them to even live, because I'm pretty sure that they're not going to be able to afford a lot of these. And I don't know if that's a question or more of a statement, but I'm just trying to find clarity with, how I would vote when we vote. So, Andrew, I see you looking. Do you have an answer? Because I just want to know.
No, the answer is I don't have an answer. These things are generally guided through your future land use maps, your zoning maps, and then your development code. So if you're looking to find a different form or typology of development, that is a good place to start.
Okay. Also, can we also get an occupancy measure on all of the high-rises and things that we have built? How occupied are these? How occupied is the Atlas? How occupied is the Ramble? How occupied are all of these big, triplexes? How occupied are they to the point where we still need, I think he said, because we are in a deficiency of these type of housing, but yet we're approving only these type of housing. So I'm not sure where the deficiency is, but it says in, you know, that there is a deficiency in some sort of study that Athens-Clarke County is deficient in viable houses, but that's all that I see. And so if we could get kind of like a rundown of all of the atlases that we've approved and how occupied each of these are, I
just-
think that we would have.
Bruce, just
for-
living in
just for my,
planning. What's the degree to which we have any occupancy numbers about sort of approved units?
like,
Yep.
who, is it full? Like, is there just so full
Yeah.
that we still need more people to live or build more apartments like these?
Correct. No, that's a very important question.
Yeah.
And from a data gathering perspective, it's something that we've been working through in our department to try to inform this type of analysis, to be perfectly honest. Capturing that occupancy information right now requires a property owner or manager to willfully provide it. And a lot of times, it's not in their best interest to provide information to say that they're unoccupied. Now, having said that, one of the things that we're working diligently with our Public Utilities Department is to try to find other data sources for showing when a unit is occupied and when it is not. Water usage tends to be one of those things. Water goes on when somebody's in a unit. And so we're working on creating a system for having snapshot moments to track occupancy. It's taken a bit of coordination. We're not there yet, but that's something that we want to have moving forward so we can answer, not even answer these questions, but anticipate them and have that a part of the analysis. Yes,
So,
ma'am.
do you think that by the time we get this information, because we are the smallest county geographically, that we would just be so built up that it wouldn't even matter? We'll just have all of these big places that's too affordable for residents, but also empty?
Okay, so occupancy and then affordability are two separate questions.
I understand that,
But
yeah.
we agree with you. That's the kind of analysis that we need to have on a regular basis. So we're trying to set up a system to have it. We're just not there yet. I don't know what the story is going to tell, but I know it'll be better than the guesses that we currently make.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I'm going to have some questions that an email can follow up with on this. One is, why is this non-binding?
Okay? You answer
You
that?
can- Go for it.
Well, what they're asking for is a straight rezone. So a straight rezone doesn't have to have a binding site plan or a binding report. So that is not a requirement to ask for a rezone.
Right, and so the 50 beds per acre
Is what
Ask.
RM3. That's what RM3 provides.
is non-binding, that it really doesn't max that out.
Correct. That's a good point. Yes.
Okay, so I think that's something for us to be mindful of. If we could get sort of a summary on the grandfathered in dwellings that we don't allow anymore, which is the mobile, the RVs, we don't allow those as a dwelling. I think some of the stuff, the modular units versus, no, modular meets code, but which, mobile doesn't meet code, modular.
Manufactured.
Is that the right way?
Manufactured is.
Manufactured doesn't meet code, so that we don't allow those anymore, but they're grandfathered in. And if we can just get a summary of that, because I think when Commissioner Link talks about changing something so that things that we don't allow can happen, I don't see that happening in time for something that's on the agenda right now. But I think it's important for us to understand why we have some that are grandfathered in. And so, can we get the picture of what's currently there now? Because it seems to me that they are the more of the recreational vehicles versus, but some of them are more traditional manufactured home further
None of
in.
those are.
They all are?
None
The
of
bulk
those are.
of
All
them
of
are the
those
kind
are
of tow
RVs.
behinds.
Pardon?
The bulk of them are tow behind.
Okay. And then, so this is a grandfathered in scenario here, but yet we have the new scenarios out in the Bulldog, what are they called, the Bull?
They're all pull in and pull out. They're only like weekend use.
I know, so I'm asking for
Yep.
the summary of what the criteria is that we are allowing those to be dwellings, the times that they are, the limit, because there's limits on them. And so if you guys can sort of give us an email that helps us understand what's allowed, what's grandfathered in, why it's allowed, because the fact that these can't continue what we understand them to be is dwellings, they can't continue in our community, right? Because these are grandfathered in.
Nowhere else for them to go.
These could continue as is.
Not somewhere
But-
else.
At this
But,
location.
yeah, other locations, any kind of RV installation is considered a campground. That goes in commercial outdoor recreation as far as a land use type. And there are places in the community where commercial outdoor recreation is permitted. There are places where it is permitted only as a special use. We just haven't had anybody propose a campground as long as I've worked here.
Okay. So if you could capture that description that says it is allowable but hasn't been asked,
Sure.
is that sort of a
We could.
code description?
Yeah.
Okay. Because if that is, in Commissioner Link's tiny home, I don't want to say soapbox, but you're passionate about it, is I didn't think that we allowed those. So that's interesting that it's allowable.
As transient lodging, no, so it's got a 30-day
Those
turnover.
are the kind of
Correct.
details that we need to know
Yeah.
about. Because
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of a standard in other communities too. You may be able to do it temporarily on your property while the main dwelling is, brick and mortar is being built.
Yeah.
And there's a situational versus becoming a whole new dwelling. Because I think it's important for us to understand why we have code and code enforcement, and as well as building permits and building codes, because they're for the safety of people within a dwelling.
So I would add, these are vehicles, and they are not structures. And so code enforcement has to look at them as vehicles. The building code that applies to it is very limited because they aren't buildings. They are
Okay.
vehicles. And so that's one of the challenges. And one of the confusions when people talk about tiny homes too, some of them are structures and some of them are vehicles. And the differentiation makes a big difference in how we allow them and regulate them and make sure they're safe.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Well, so anyway, if you could help us understanding this, because I know this is getting us on a topic just because it does affect this, but what we're trying to approve, it really, my concerns are more along the lines of a straight rezone that's with the non-binding. Now, I understand it doesn't have to be, but it's a big ask
Okay.
without.
And there was that condition to make the architecture.
Well, I've
binding,
never
but-
seen that before, and I kind of would end up wanting the attorney's office to give us some feedback on that. Maybe I don't understand that phrase. And
What phrase?
the phrase that he had that they added in there, it's non-binding, but they're trying to get some verbiage in there that seems binding.
Condition.
I hadn't seen that before, but if the attorney's office can give us some feedback on that.
Could you email that to me and I'll share it with John?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. That's just, thanks for letting me process
Got
that out
some
loud.
folks who've not spoken yet. I've got everybody captured. You don't have to hold your hand up. I got Commissioner Thornton, then Commissioner Johnson. and,
You know, I guess,
Kevin Myers.
Commissioner Wright has thrown me totally off my question. Sorry
about that, buddy.
But, the housing conversation in need has been my mantra for since I've been on this commission, period. We've done affordable housing summits. I can tell you who's come from this commission and who has not, because a lot of questions that Commissioner Wright asked has been discussed in some of these summits. The difference of, the difference of manufacturer, modular, tiny, RVs, at some time or another has been discussed. But I want to say, first of all, I think this is an excellent proposal. I have met with not only the architect, the realtor, the owner, I've met with developers, and it's excellent for that location. The other thing I want us to keep in mind, Mr. Bob could sell this to anybody. And it could be something that we have no control over at all. It could change that whole community as it's already zoned for. And the other thing, I would say this for anybody who owns property, that's their right to sell their property if that's what they want. But I would like for people to know that Mr. Bob has been actively trying to replace or get these folks settled, not that they will be on the street. He's gone to Madison, Commerce, he's gone to the Housing Authority. I have also done the same thing. I've been talking to developers, and I do believe we do have a solution that can work. The other thing is if we don't, and I'm going to say this too, because I need to say this at the end. This is a good project, but I don't think I could support it if we could not try to find places for those 12 families. It would be so hypocritical of me, and I've already spoke to Chase and Brett and Mr. Bob. They all know how I feel. We would be doing the same thing that Prosperity Church did to those residents that lived over there on Lexington. So it's our job. Somebody told me when I was hunting for a place to relocate this, OB, that's not your job. Yeah, well, my job is not to make people homeless either. So if we need to start looking at rezonings and planning and the future land use plan, that's what we need to be doing. Because when that land use plan was created 25 years ago, I do think it was very discriminatory. I do believe that we were cut out low end. Back then, you have zoning laws that are racist. So we need to get to the root of the problem instead of us keep moving forward. Because I do hear Tiffany, Commissioner Taylor's frustration. But a lot of it is because of our zoning and the land plan we're using now. We probably need to put a break on some of these developments, which is another thing that I've been advocating for. I do agree with Commissioner Wright. I do think this should be binding, because if this doesn't go through with y'all for some reason, it opens the door for anybody else to do whatever they want to do. So it does need to be binding, in my opinion. I'm going to be meeting with the developer that we think we might have a move for them, but to get to the frustration that Commissioner Taylor is sharing, it's not this project. It's everything in this community. And we have been kicking the ball down the road, kicking it. And I tell you another thing that I know since I have been looking into this. There is a direct intention to go apartments. Single housing is not on some of the players' playbook, and that's wrong. We need to look at manufactured homes, modular, tiny. We need to look at homes for, if we're looking at a bunch of people coming in here, they're talking 3,000 to 6,000 in 2030. They're not just talking about UGA students. They're talking about an influx the professional folk and everybody. So what happens to the people who are already here? We don't even talk to these people. But I'm not going to belabor this. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure those 12 or 8 or whatever the numbers is can get resituated. So we may be coming back here asking you guys for, what's that thing we're coming back for? Well, we're coming back. But to get your approval, it's not right. It's not right to hold up Mr. Bob. Mr. Bob ain't no teenager no more. He wants to relax. He wants to enjoy life. He got this big piece of land he can't do nothing with unless we help him. But he's out here trying to help it. How many developers, how many owners do you know that have gotten out in the community to make sure their tenants were okay? No, they get that 30-day notice, and then we send the sheriff to evict them if they don't move. So I'm going to do the best I can, but I'm going to support Commissioner Taylor, because she's right. It's not just apartments. But if you hear the conversations, even the conversations at the future land use meetings, some folk want to get rid of single dwelling homes. Now, if I'm lying, somebody better correct me, because that's what I was told. Okay, so correct me if I'm lying. Bruce, you got the floor. But here we go again with always being behind the wheel and never opening up. Believe it or not, I look forward to working with Commissioner Link on this and come up with something that helps everybody, not just these 12 folk, but the folk that are also at risk of losing their homes for whatever.
I've got Commissioner Johnson and Davenport Myers, and I'll return to Commissioner Link. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I have a really quick question for, I believe you said, is it Mr. Brett?
Mr. Nave, the designer.
No, the second person, second
That's
individual?
Mr. Lawrence.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Lawrence. May I ask, can I please ask him a question?
Of course.
I really appreciate how deliberate you are in describing what your vision is, and I've seen and witnessed you communicate concepts at the future land use meeting. And you made a comment that struck me as curious, and I like it, but I wanted to ask you said your entire team is local. That's really, really impressive, because we have SPLOST projects, T-SPLOST projects, capital projects, and we can't say that. So I really appreciate you saying that. The second part to that I wanted to ask, do you have a set team? And I ask that because I want to know if there are certified, qualified tradesmen with tons of experience, do you hire local people, or do you just have a set team?
We don't have a set team. In
Okay.
every project we do, it's our ambition first and foremost to use all local vendors.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. Okay. I don't have to press the button after all. Okay, I don't know if I can be succinct, but I'm going to really try. I agree with the questions that Commissioner Wright had. I also have the same questions. However, I don't want you to send them in email to me. I would prefer that they be folded into the agenda item, because if we have questions, that means residents have questions. And it's all about transparency and just clarifying the bigger issue, if that would be okay. Commissioner Taylor just hit it on the head. You don't understand unless you grew up here. I predict in 10 years, no one will be able to say, I grew up in Athens. I see Athens changing. And Commissioner Thornton, you made a comment about, you heard that there was discussion about getting rid of single-family homes in the flu meeting. Well, it did come up, actually. It was a little tiff back and forth. There was no decision, but there was an argument for it and the positives, and there was an argument against it. The thing is, you all, the FLU, or Future Land Use Steering Committee, has been meeting since last April, every 2 weeks. And you made a comment, Commissioner Thornton, about we need to know what's going on with zoning. What we are behaving as victims. We are not allowing ourselves to get involved with this process. And when I say that, I'm saying I had a resident try to obtain information about the meeting because he wanted to attend, knowing it's a public meeting, and never received a response. He was able to track down a meeting date, and he asked if I would go. And ever since then, I have been going. I noted that the meeting was not posted on the public calendar. And when I say public calendar, I'm talking about the landing page that every resident goes to when you put in ACCGov. Now, when you dig deeper or maybe go incognito, you can actually find it behind the scenes, but it's not posted publicly. We don't know about it. I know I print the calendar every single week because I want to set out and plan the meetings that I want to go to every week. We cannot be educated and we cannot make responsible policy decisions if we're not finding out the information and attending. And now, if we don't want to attend, that's our fault. But if we want to attend and learn, benefit, contribute, and maybe add some suggestions, we need to know when they are. They need to be clear. It needs to be transparent. And so far, it has not been. I was forced to submit an open records request for documents for the FLU Steering Committee that meets every 2 weeks. This is something that zoning, Commissioner Taylor, you are absolutely right. Commissioner Thornton, you're absolutely right. We are not policymakers in this decision. We are. And the reason why I say that is because I've attended the meetings and I have witnessed individuals be influenced by policies, by zoning. You know, it's just selling one up and discouraging another type of zoning. There are a few people who want mixed use density, houses on top of houses, less than 10 feet to code. I'm of the thought that beautify an area, transition an area that's actually dilapidated. But I'm okay if we have enough. We can max out. There is a time and there is a place that we are maxed out, and that's okay. We don't owe it to anybody to keep building unless we're going to build vertically. That's the only zoning that we should realistically be discussing. But to talk about quadruplexes, single-family homes, neighborhoods, because there's an empty parcel, if you live by that empty parcel and you're okay with it, okay, I guess I would be too. But I just wanted us to all be mindful that there are meetings all over the place that are talking about this, and what's going to happen is we're going to get an agenda item in 2.5 months to say vote. And it's almost going to be too late. And that's why I'm mentioning it now.
And just because the broader question of future land use has emerged, obviously we're talking about a single zoning item here tonight on a single parcel, but just insofar as that broader discussion goes, laying out the roadmap and the calendar just so commissioners are kind of conscious of these checkpoints that are coming up later this calendar year. That's one of your items that you'll see on the agenda tomorrow during our mini retreat, because we want to make sure that you're conscious of what that will look like for the rest of at least this calendar year as we move to future land use designations and then subsequently to some zoning code amendments as well. Anything else, Commissioner Johnson?
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much.
All right, I've got Commissioner Davenport.
My comment is going to be germane to this project. Really quick, during the video presentation, there was something about sewer. Did I get that right? Maybe I didn't. Okay. And one of the zoning requirements is playground area. Would the pool area be considered? Or did I read that wrong? You just gave me that look. So if you go up to page, I just had it. For the RM3 code 925 8C7C, code compliance issues, play area for children is required. So would that be one of the conditions, part of this, this plan? Or would that be incorporated in the pool area?
So the pool area and the grounds around the pool, as well as the area in between, I think there's a green space area that's planned down Strickland. Those areas could count towards that square footage.
Okay.
Honestly, that's, again, because they were not submitting a binding plan, that was something that compliance would be taken care of during the plans review process. They would have to do it by code. They're not seeking relief from that requirement.
And during the planning commission meeting, nothing came up about sewer.
I think that's the next project.
Okay,
Okay.
there we go.
Anything else, Commissioner?
No, I'm done.
Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I do have something germane to this project, but I also want to ask, following up on some of the other discussions, not for an answer right now, but I believe I've sort of queried about this before in terms of a list of the developments, the multifamily developments, and we may have already gotten this, that have all been approved in maybe the last 5 years. How many were approved? How many started construction? How many had occupancy, and with the numbers of beds in there? I think that would be helpful for us to see what's going on, because there are a lot of things. Some of them come up quickly and are there. Some of them, they don't come up quickly and they aren't there. So that would be helpful for us as we're going on with the future land use map. And then along with that, and I think we've already gotten this too, as we go into this stuff, the list of I think you've already given this in one of those presentations, the list of property, how much of our property is zoned single-family, multifamily, and such. Are we at a map like that, I believe? That would be really helpful to get. And I know the future, and I just want to speak to that, to the future land use committee, because I know that there is a lot going on. It's really, and we could probably always be a lot more transparent, but I do want to know that, right as of now, if anyone's watching, the list of all the people is on there. I, as a commissioner, have regular communication with the member that I appointed to that committee, so there are ways that we can stay informed on that as well. I'm not sure if all of the meetings were videotaped, but as you just heard when I turned one on by accident, there are several from the last couple of months, so I think the earlier ones might not be on here. But in terms of this, I do want to ask a question about the binding versus the conditions that are on there, that you can clarify that. I think Commissioner Wright, we need that clarification that she asked about legally, can we go back to that one phrase there again? Where is that? What that would actually mean, how that actually would be applied. The architectural design intent shall be binding with regards to mass scale materials in general, fenestration. So does the planning department have to give us how that would apply? Because I remember hearing a discussion you all had at the planning commission meeting on that. Is that also something that the attorney's office needs to weigh in on, whether that would be applicable as we're going forward here, how that would be applied? And so I would like that, but in addition, we've had this discussion before, the difference between a situation here where we have this condition versus binding. And if I remember from the planning commission, the planning commissioners also brought this up about could this be a planned development, and it had to do with I believe it always seems to comes down to the elevation and the ability to move things around to have them all fit in there because you haven't done all the engineering or something on that. So could you address that again, that difference, the binding versus this condition, and what this allows versus
Sure.
why this would be better in this case?
Well, the discussion was, you're exactly right. The applicant didn't have the comfort level that site plan was exactly to the point where that could go to construction as drawn. part of that is the topography of the site. It's stair steps. There's kind of these plateaus across the property. And they were arranging the buildings to try to work with those. But there is no final grading that's been prepared. The stormwater design has not been fully conceived of and incorporated. They've left placeholders for those facilities. So the challenge is, if you have a development that has been proposed, but it hasn't thought through those details, if a movement needs to take place, then they're coming back before this body to ask for the ability to move a building or to flip an arrangement. We have no other mechanism. We do have that 15-day pass-around that the planning director has the ability to use for minor changes, but moving a building would not be a minor change. So this language was proposed because there was a lot of discussion and agreement that the architecture that was submitted was very strong. The Planning Commission felt very comfortable with that and didn't want to see something different as part of this development. So aesthetically, this language provides, we felt like through that discussion, this language borrows heavily from how we do design review for Historic Preservation Commission. And so it uses language that we're familiar with. So massing and scale, those are measurable things. Those drawings that they provided have mass and they have scale and they have literally scale to them. We can measure them. The materials are specified. So maybe if they had to make a change, but they used the same palette of materials, as well as the openings, the doorways, the windows, then we've got something to work with that is predictable. So the end result, the look of the buildings would be consistent with what was submitted, even if the arrangement had to shift to respond to engineering realities.
And to help me understand that one bit more, and maybe you or maybe the architect, because the architect, this is the same architect as the Oconee Street
That's right.
project we just looked at, which is a planned development. So for that development, when it came in, which it will be, you know, when it's not a condition, it's a planned development, was there, and there was an elevation challenge over there with the Ann Street up so high, was there different engineering work that went into that one than went into this one?
You may want to
Is, was, hi.
They're actually quite different scenarios there. So on the previous project,
Right.
1280 Oconee Ann Street, we had a handful of things that didn't quite fit in the zoning that we needed to ask for. Therefore, it had to be a PD to accomplish those. Here, we can get everything more or less we can get everything to fit. It's just that we need some more density to kind of create this feel, this neighborhood vibe. So that's really the point of the rezone. We don't have any waivers that we need, like building height or, you know, it all just otherwise kind of works if we can change to that zoning. So it doesn't need to be a PD.
Oh, I understand that it doesn't need to be a PD, but in the actual drawings that you show us that look so pretty and inviting and, you know, aesthetically pleasing, did you do different engineering work for one than for, like, for the one than for this one, because this is not a PD? Am I understanding that correctly? No.
I don't think so, but
Okay.
I may not quite be with you, but you can just steer me there. With the previous project, 1280 Oconee, we know all the moving parts. It's a pretty simple site. I mean, you can see it's basically flat and then a steep hill in
Yeah.
there. So the grading's done there, the stormwater's figured out there. It's small and it's easy. This one is 22 feet up. It's kind of a hyperbolic. It's 22 feet up and it tilts another way. And we've got a couple of drives that we need to align so that traffic's happy with it. And so that's where you're seeing the N on North and the N on Strickland as well. So, I'm kicking a wire here, sorry.
Okay.
And so there's a lot more to this site to get it to all kind of plane out, because, you know, North entry and Strickland entry are nowhere near the same height. We've got grade across the top on the ACC building up here that we've got to cut in. There's just a lot of retaining work and moving dirt around. And so for a project like this, it takes a couple of months to figure that out, whereas on 1280 Oconee, it takes a couple of days. And since we didn't, all we were looking for here, at first we thought we might need to do a PD, but in talking with the planning department, Bruce and Mark helped us realize, well, you don't really have any waivers.
It's not required.
Yeah, and so let's see what we can figure out, and because we're just weird and diligent, the whole team, we're all just like, well, we don't want to come to you guys, and I'm not about to tell Commissioner Thornton I'm going to do this, and then we're not going to be able to do something like this, right?
Blow you up.
That's right. So, I mean, we want to figure it out. I mean, that's our challenge in life, is solving the problem. So we're pretty far along. We know that we can do this, but as Bruce is kind of pointing out, there's going to be, like, we don't know for sure, for example, if the retaining wall, right when you're coming off of Strickland on the left, there's a little wall off the sidewalk. We don't know if it's this high or if it's that high or if it's that high exactly, because there's a lot of work from the top of the site to get there. So that's kind of where something as complex as this kind of hyperbolic heavy topo site, it takes a mountain of work, and we've done enough work to say, yeah, we can do this, but we don't know exactly. And so that's what Bruce means, like if we have to move a building, it might mean that that building goes here, not necessarily over there, but that might, sit 1.5 feet higher, and this one might slide over 2 feet and go that way. So it's more like that, the finesse of it, but because PDs are so strictly binding it, I think it handcuffs us and the planning department to be able to make these finesses. And since we work with, Bruce and Mark and those folks all the time, I think we have a really good understanding, and especially like with HPC language, we kind of get where our leeway is, and we don't want to come to you guys and say, oh, we had to make this building 2 feet shorter. We get to spend another 1.5 hours of your time when you've got other things to do, when it might be doable in another way.
That's helpful.
That provide what you need, Commissioner?
Yep.
I think I've got Commissioner Link again.
Yeah. I mean, Commissioner Meyer's concerns kind of got to the crux of the issue, is the weird topography of this lot and the massive amount of pre-engineering that would have to be done to come up with a determined binding plan, which I totally understand. I mean, I've been on the property several times. I have a question which kind of pertains to our earlier conversation. Bruce, is anyone in any residential zone allowed to park their RV in their driveway for storage? Or is there any guidelines to that?
Well, if it's your vehicle, and if it's on a prepared surface in the front yard, then you're in good shape.
In the front yard?
If it's in the front, it can be on the driveway or whatever pad area, paved area is allowed by code. Could not be on the grass. So if you're going to store it, if you're going to park it, it needs to be on a prepared surface. Those are the rules for the front yard, if we're in a single-family zone. If it's in the rear yard, and again, it's your vehicle, storing it doesn't have to be on a prepared surface. But you also can't create an erosion issue or some of the other things that may come along with it not being on a prepared surface. The other thing that we're not able to issue permits for is to have those campers connected.
Yeah.
So parking is one thing, occupied
Yeah.
is another.
So you're allowed to park these vehicles pretty much in any neighborhood as long as you don't have somebody living in them. So that's the direction I'm heading, is, let's determine particular zones and conditions in which you might be able to allow someone to live in them, and open up opportunities for affordable housing, and also for people to, who might have lots of a particularly large scale, to maybe make a little rent, allowing these folks to find a place to park their vehicle, because there's nowhere in town that it is allowed. And maybe it is a special use permit, or, but that's another conversation. I want to speak briefly to the condition that planning set forth, and that's lifted straight out of our historic preservation ordinance, which is really strict. I in conversation with the developer, I might be open to tweaking that language a little bit to assure that they have that leeway that they need as they move these buildings, possibly, move these buildings here and there. I mean, the architecture is really lovely, and that's what's nice about this project. You rarely see those kind of traditional slope roof profiles in a project like this, and the variation of buildings. So I want to make sure that we, adhere to that vision that's in here, while still assuring that this project can go through without being, a massive engineering nightmare as they figure out the engineering that deals with that weird topography.
Commissioner Thornton, you had a follow-up?
Yes, couple of things. I think when I talked to Brett, when I talked to you, we're okay with sewer and stormwater. We're good with that, right? Okay. So I thought there was a question from somebody about the sewer.
But Patrick was recalling that another item had a sewer-related
Okay,
question.
okay,
but
okay,
it
but
wasn't
we're
this one.
good with the sewer, because that was the first thing I asked about. My next point is, from what I understand, Bruce, that we could do a special use for any areas except for EO. I have no idea what EO means. I think I do, but is that correct?
It's the light industrial, the EI, where commercial outdoor recreation is allowed by right. So we do have one of those tailgate facilities in that zoning category. It's near our solid waste facility. But for example, the one that is on Oak Street that you might see, that is zoned CG, and that was a special use to be able to
But can we
develop it.
do a special use in this situation? Let me do this. Let me
Okay.
come and see you, and I won't hold up the meeting, because
Yeah.
we may have to go down that road if it's possible, okay?
Sure.
So I won't hold you up on that.
Okay.
You did, the other thing that I think I wish I could talk as calmly as Commissioner Johnson, so laid back and professional. One of the things that I found out, Bruce, serving on the GIT committee, there doesn't seem to be a connection between HCD and the planning department. There were a lot of questions about, what's in the pipeline and what's coming down, and it doesn't seem like the questions that were asked here tonight, it seems like we're not getting the full picture of the projects and stuff coming down the pike. So is there, and I think we agreed that you would kind of start working together with HCD, but I do think that the questions that we heard tonight about what is in the pipeline, who has, what project coming down, that would be a great report every 6 months or so.
Commissioner Thornton, given Assistant Manager Saunders' prior service in HCD,
Okay.
he can probably provide us just with an overview of the collection of projects that we're aware of through there.
Well, and to speak to the collaboration, you're correct in most respects that stronger collaboration would benefit not only between planning and HCD, but between HCD and other entities like code enforcement. This is actually going to be a recommendation, not to get too far ahead of it, but it's a recommendation in an upcoming audit that will be presented to you all, and the manager's office and HCD support that there be more structured interaction between HCD and some of these other departments that could address items of this nature. I don't want to say that there's not a complete connection. So, for example, both entities participated in the affordable housing investment strategy. On the other hand, if both entities were at the table sooner on a project like Lexington Flats that came before you, where there was a low-income housing tax credit application associated with it, I think we probably could have worked out some of those bumps in the road before we got behind the rail.
Okay.
So more to come.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I don't think we can solve any of the affordable housing when you have two groups that are not in sync. And my last comment, I want to also agree with Commissioner Johnson about your team being local. I think that speaks volumes. People are dropping bricks and mortar here and moving on. At least we can come find y'all if it don't go right. But I do think that that does speak volumes, and I would like to see more of our developers and architect folk in these conversations about housing. Most of and we've talked about this when I met with you. A lot of the conversations that we have about housing, they're the traditional, the regular crew. But the developers and the realtors, we're trying to make seats around the table for you because affordable housing is not going to happen if you don't understand all the dynamics. You're here to build houses, and I'm here to make sure everybody has a house. So I look forward to continuing to work with you.
Any other questions about this item? All right, we're going to move on to item number 8.
All right. The next item is a rezone request for 1691 Milledge Avenue Extension. The request is to rezone from RM1 mixed density residential to RM2. So that would represent an increase in density of 16 beds to the acre to 24 beds to the acre. The future land use is mixed density residential. They're not proposing a change to that. The proposal is to add 1 3-bedroom residence next to the existing single-family residential house that's on that tract. That density increase that RM2 would allows for a maximum of 3 additional bedrooms on the lot. So the theme tonight, I think, is infill. So here's the location aerial view. It's very close to the UGA housing to the east. Milledge Avenue Extension is that road that frequently is not driven upon. It's a destination. It's not something you would just pass by. But this piece is kind of wedged betwixt in between some multifamily housing to the west and the student housing to the east. It is a moment of mixed density residential shown on our future land use, and that category is compatible with what they're asking for. And so the rezone that is being requested would take it from RM1 to RM2. There is RM2 immediately to the west and across Milledge Avenue Extension. So it is moving across the right-of-way, but that zoning is immediately adjacent. Here's a photograph from the street of the existing house and the garage there to the right. The new development would be just to the new 3-bedroom structure would be just to the right of that garage, as shown on the site plan. And then here's an elevation depiction of what they're wanting to do to accommodate those 3 additional bedrooms, floor plan on the right. Planning Commission recommendation, they found it to be compatible with the 23 comprehensive plan in that it increases supply and variety of housing, it prioritizes infill and redevelopment. It's compatible with future land use, the zoning map, and all related ordinances. It does allow that density increase to have the 3 additional bedrooms on the lot. But there is the need for a sewer main extension per the analysis prepared by our Public Utilities Department. So with that in mind, there was a recommendation to include this condition of approval that a sanitary sewer main extension is required for the proposed new structure to be served by Athens-Clarke County sanitary sewer. That concludes the staff report.
All right, this is in District 10. Commissioner Hamby's not with us tonight, but does anyone else have a question or observation? Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I could share. Did we need to ask if anybody in the...
Oh, I apologize. Thank you very much. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Thank you. I appreciate the note. Evening. How are you?
Good. How you doing? My name's Brad Martin, 240 Forsyth Drive. I am the owner of the property. I appreciate you allowing me to come today. Couple things to address. The garage we have there is just the metal garage. It will come down. In the place of the metal garage will be the house. And also the approval with condition. I did talk with Public Utility today. We talked about a viable plan for extending the sewer. We're comfortable with the plan, and we're going to be preparing some engineering drawings for them to look at it and get it approved. That's all I have. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Is there anyone else here to speak to this item? Any commissioners? Commissioner Wright?
Yes, because this was in my district for about 10 years. This is one of the last remaining, what I would call original houses that are down in this area. The bulk of them, where their backyard would be to property from Milledge. On the other side of this, the little houses have been removed and predominantly student, but it's less of a parking area there. It's become very residential back there and less people parking for extended periods of time. So anyway, we've made it a nice area, I think, and for rentals and for students. It's this, I think, just by the location, it tends to be that way, but it is the family housing for UGA as well, so that does have a wide spectrum of age, and the school buses go up and down there and transit, but I'm glad that the house is going to remain and it's going to be upgraded to, and fitting in the same zoning, right?
Well, asking for the new zoning, but
Asking for the new zoning.
within the future land use category.
But,
Yep.
yeah, and this is very quaint house that's already on there compared to the tallness and the structures across. So it'll blend nicely with what's happening, has already happened there, in my opinion.
Commissioner Link?
Being that this is an RM1 to RM2 with no conditions really, I mean, this is one of those instances where a straight rezone could allow just a future demolition and replacement with an apartment complex, which may not be a bad thing, but I just want to put that out there that, when we're talking about binding site plans, that's, I'm just curious as to, why the applicant isn't putting some kind of binding conditions on it if the house is to remain.
Bruce, I don't know if you have any insights into that.
Well, again, the discussion on that point is to bring this request before the mayor and commission. The binding aspect of this is not required. However, it is certainly within the purview of this group to bring that question up and pose it to the applicant. But it is not a requirement to make this application that it be binding.
What's the front setback requirement in this zone?
Bless you. Off the top of my head, I believe it's 15 feet.
Okay. So if it were to be redeveloped into a different building, it would be just 15 feet off the curb, off the sidewalk, the right-of-way?
Off the right-of-way line.
There's no side.
There's no sidewalk there?
Commissioner, one observation I'd make on the redevelopment potential is that given that this is just over a third of an acre, probably the ability to do very much is somewhat limited.
Yeah, but there is RM2 right next to it, correct?
There is RM1 zoning to the south.
Okay.
There we are. To the north it's actually Zone G. It's part of UGA's properties.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out,
Commissioner Davenport?
Would it be considered an ADU based on, well, just when I originally read it, it just seemed like it would be an ADU because you're building a separate detached dwelling behind or beside a house.
Yeah, accessory dwelling units are allowed by right in the RM zone. This meets the definition of an ADU in terms of being subordinate to the primary house and the distance off the right-of-way and the overall height. It does work.
Okay.
Is that? Yep.
Anything else? Commissioner Thorne?
I'm going to go back to the binding question. Bruce, help me understand. With most of the rezones that are coming before us, whether they're big or small, they seem to be coming in as non-binding. If a project falls apart and it was it was non-binding, and a new developer comes in, what does that mean? And this has nothing to do with the applicant. I'm just trying to get an understanding
Sure.
about binding.
Yeah, if the zoning is changed and the plans are not binding in any way, whether there's an aspect that's binding or the entire submittal is binding, then the regulations associated with that zone would dictate the development of that property. So in this case, 9 bedrooms would be possible. 9 bedrooms is what the applicant has shown with the arrangement of the buildings there, but should they choose to remove those structures and build new, they could still do 9 bedrooms potentially on the site. That, plus the development standards that go along with it as far as height and placement and setbacks, those things would all still apply.
So and I'm trying to visualize this. So with the Strickland and North Avenue, non-binding, and God forbid something just doesn't go through, and a new developer comes, would they be attached to the agreement of the current developer? Or does that change?
Assuming that the condition language was in place.
Yeah.
The condition that was proposed as far as the architecture, that would be, if it were to move forward the way the Planning Commission recommended, that would be the only aspect that is binding, is the architectural
Only
depiction.
that.
Only that would be binding,
But what about the whole project?
meaning would they have to do
Yeah.
that development?
Yeah.
No, ma'am. They would have, in that case, going back an item, if we had RM3 on the ground and they wanted to build RM3 uses, the only thing that would be binding would be that architectural statement. So placement, number of bedrooms, they could work through all of that. Whatever RM3 would allow would be fair game because those would be the standards they'd be working with.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, it's important to note that in any of these zoning categories, there are a number of components that are in the development standards grid, like how much of the lot you can cover, how tall the building can be, how much fenestration or windows and doors have to be on the building. All of those components are already in code, so they would have to follow those elements that are part of RM3 zoning.
Thank you, Mayor.
And RM2, what's the height on RM2? Is it 40?
Should bring the binder more often. The building height in RM2, I believe, is 35.
It's 30,
And there is an ability to go higher with certain distances from other properties, but yeah, 35.
and 35 is the midpoint of the roof slope.
If you have a pitched roof, it's the halfway point between the eave and the ridge, yeah.
Any other questions about this one? All right, we've got another one that's just a couple blocks away.
All right. Sorry. All right, next item is at 997 South Milledge Avenue. This is a rezone request. It's also an infill proposition. The ask is to go from commercial office to RM2. Future land use would be unchanged. Mixed density residential is appropriate for both zoning classifications. Also a non-binding plan for multifamily development behind the existing single-family structure, bearing in mind that that single-family structure has been used as an office for a very long time. A single office tenant occupied that. I believe it was a law firm most recently. The units in the back would be single-family attached as proposed, 9 units total, a total of 20 bedrooms possible with the rezone. The ask here is to convert an existing historic structure. It is a locally designated structure, so a certificate of appropriateness is required, not just for renovations or exterior changes to the main house, but also the approval for the development at the rear is coming through Historic Preservation Commission review. The end goal would be constructing 4 single-family attached units behind a 5-unit multifamily building, which would be that existing house. So aerial view of the property. Current future land use being mixed density residential. That's also predominantly what's in the area. So kind of deciphering what you're seeing here from a zoning standpoint, we have a number of overlays involved on this section of Milledge Avenue. You have the historic district, but then you also have the Milledge Avenue design overlay. Both of those are in effect with this development, so they would have to adhere to those regulations that are associated with each. Regardless of the rezone, it doesn't change those overlays. A couple things to note from this image. Immediately to the north, you have a special use that's associated with the fraternity use there. Immediately to the east, you have 10 condominium units that are part of a development. We did have a representative at the Planning Commission come and speak about the proximity of this proposed development to their units with a particular focus on stormwater. And the applicant responded to those questions as part of that deliberation about the design of the stormwater for the site, the project site under consideration, and how they felt there was a plan for addressing the runoff in a way that would not harm the adjacent property owners. But what you're seeing here is that RM2 zoning being kind of isolated in a way. It is not inconsistent with the future land use, but it is dissimilar from the surrounding zoning. The key things to point out, even though the zoning classification is dissimilar, they are retaining that existing structure at the front, and it is proposing multifamily use, which is also immediately adjacent on the CO-zoned property to the east. Some photographs of the subject property. This is the view from South Milledge, that existing historic structure. This is toward the back of the site looking east. Where the truck is, that general area would be where the 4 attached units would roughly be located. And here's a site plan depicting the same. Architectural elevations, these are still in development with the HPC. They have presented for discussion, they've received comment, and it's my understanding the applicant is working through those comments. Ultimately, that certificate of appropriateness will dictate what this design can and cannot be. All right, some other views of what's proposed. Planning Commission recommendation finds that this is compatible with the comprehensive plan. It's compatible with future land use, zoning map, and associated ordinances. That increased residential density is in keeping with the area conditions, context. There was comment about scale, density, and detailing, but as I noted, those are going to be finalized as part of the Historic Preservation Commission's consideration of their COA. And that review has to be required and completed before they can submit for plans review to get permits for construction. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you, Bruce. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Evening.
Good evening. Vincent Bricka with Ensemble Architecture Engineering, 257 Kennington Drive. Thank you, Bruce. You covered most of the points that I was going to cover tonight, but just to speak a little bit to the project, the goal is really to restore the existing structure, maintain it, do minimal changes to the exterior, and we're working, and I've actually already got an approval this week with HPC to do some very minor changes to that, which is unrelated to the rezone. The other part is, and put 5 single-bedroom unit in that building. The other part is those townhomes, single-family residential on the back, that are proposed here and that trigger some of that rezone. I know that some concerns were raised with some of the neighbors with stormwater. We actually already met with them this past Saturday and met with the Rutherford Commons individuals right on the east of our property to just discuss and some of their concerns. And it was mainly related to stormwater runoff, which we will work as we do the engineering, on satisfying those elements. Their buildings, specifically to speak to that, their buildings are a little bit up on a higher elevation, so they will not be impacted by what we're doing here, but they had concerns. The plans that you see here are really part of our due diligence to make sure that what we are requesting for a rezone makes actually sense. They're not, like some of the previous submittal, not fully engineered, but just to get started process, we went through HPC initially to get an initial sense of their thoughts on our project. And like Bruce was saying, we will make some adjustments, specifically working on height, make sure the scale, the size, the architecture is appropriate for the area. Just also to point out that the new rezone requires us additional setback than what the current zone is, so it actually requires our building to be further from the back of the property. It also actually restricts some of the height a little bit more than what it currently is. So yeah, I think that covers a little bit what I was going to say. If you have any questions, I'm available. I also have Ed Lane with the Smith's Planning Group if there are any questions related to civil, stormwater, or aspects like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Breca. Would anyone else like to speak to this submission? Good evening.
Hi. My name is Kim Kraling. I am speaking in favor of 997 South Milledge Avenue rezone to RM2. My residence is located in the town of North High Shoals. I am the registered agent for ETL Construction. I'm excited about the opportunity to actually help preserve the historic character of Milledge Avenue and to provide more family-type housing and largely owner-occupied housing that can coexist with the diversity of Athens and with all of the student housing that's here at Athens. Five Points area offers loads of walkable and bikeable opportunities to frequent restaurants and shopping for future residents of this development. Changing from commercial zoning to residential zoning is a real benefit to the community. I also love that this early 1900s home is being fully restored to its former grandeur, and the townhome concepts will be a great addition to the Milledge Avenue community. The adjacent neighbors appear to be excited about the townhomes and general development as a whole as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kraling. Is there anyone else here to speak to this? All right, this is in District 10. Again, Commissioner Hamby's not with us tonight. Does anybody else have any comments or questions about this item? Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I was actually at the HPC meeting when they approved the original structure changes last week. And yeah, this is a great way to kind of restore a historic structure back to its residential origins, and to get that infill density that we need on, a major corridor. One of the speakers mentioned owner-occupied. Will these townhomes be owner-occupied, or is? Okay, well, that's good to know. I'm a big fan of townhomes. My mom grew up in Brooklyn, so I'm pretty familiar with them, and, I feel like that's something we should try to aim for more of, especially when we're trying to pack some density into our urban core. So yeah, I think this is a pretty nice project. I'm interested to hear what Commissioner Hamby has to say about it.
Anything else? Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I just had a question on the, the layout here. I listened to this without watching it, and going down the street. I keep looking at it, and I've been on Google Maps here. But the condos that are behind it, you really can't, we can't see them right over there. But those condos look like they're accessible, like they're behind Mathis Apartments and down the line. So they're kind of like snuck in a back where you wouldn't know that they existed, the average Joe walking around Athens. And likewise, these are going to be similar, but they're behind this property on Milledge. They're sort of stuck in the back there. I mean, there's a similarity between the two condo developments. And just so I can understand this, you mentioned that this will help keep the historic nature. Is that because these will help for the upkeep of the house that's on Milledge? So
Are you talking to me?
Well, I guess who am I supposed to speak to on that? How do these have to follow the historic preservation, because even though they're back in this space where there was nothing before, they have to meet certain standards, but it doesn't affect the main house at all?
Well, the main house has to meet those standards as well.
Right, of course,
But
yeah.
this does provide that additional layer of design review because it is in the local historic district.
Okay, but they're brand-new buildings that have to fit that.
That's correct.
Okay. But it doesn't do anything to help with the main building in the front? That's completely separate?
If it does, perhaps it's a financial consideration.
Right,
Yeah.
right, okay.
Any other questions about this one? All right, we've got one code update.
All right, the last item from the Planning Commission is a response to the resolution that this body sent forward in November, asking for a text amendment to be prepared regarding halfway houses, largely in response, entirely in response, to House Bill 1073 that proposed amendments to the Code of Georgia, 3666 4F. And what we did was we went through our code, found any references to that. Turned out it was one reference, which is 9-15-21. The text that's proposed is at the bottom of the screen there. And really what this all encompasses is striking through the language that references the state statute. With that removal, we have satisfied the directive, and what this essentially is dealing with is a review timeline that used to be required for a 6-month pause, you may remember, between initial consideration and final consideration of halfway houses and other types of specialized housing that receives state review and regulatory consideration. There was a 6-month holding period between your first hearing and your last. That was removed as part of House Bill 1073. So this is removing that reference from our local code so that there is no confusion. And this is what's been prepared. The Planning Commission recommends approval as written.
Thanks, Bruce. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, any comments or questions from commissioners? Commissioner Link?
Yeah, so am I correct in saying that these kinds of residences are only permitted in RM zone, multifamily zones? They're not permitted in single-family zones or commercial zones at all?
Correct. The way the code is set up, you're correct. Yep.
Commissioner Myers?
Do we have any applications that are waiting for that 6 months?
No, ma'am. In fact, the last halfway house submittal that came through after this state statute had been amended. So we actually have, as a body, processed one that didn't have to follow the 6-month hold. That was on Henderson Avenue Extension.
Okay.
Further questions? All right, Bruce, thank you for being with us tonight. I appreciate it, and
Thank
we
all
will
of you.
move to old new business. All right, for this following along, old new business tonight are items 11 through 16. So now's the time for input from the public for any of those items. Would anyone like to speak to any of those items, 11 through 16? Terms of public input are, as described earlier, a 3-minute opportunity. And again, just your name and place of residence and the item to which you're speaking. Good evening.
Good afternoon, or good evening, good night, one tail or the other. Alvin Sheets, Post Office Box 5142, Athens, Georgia. Good evening, Mayor, Commission, and esteemed ones. A few years back in the 70s, I believe it was, there was a show called And You Are There. Just imagine if you were there when Cain and the creator of the universe and all that is good and perfect had a conversation. Genesis 4th chapter, 9th verse said, Then the Lord said to Cain, Where is Abel, your brother? He said, I do not know, am I my brother's keeper? God answered that question today. God answered that question, and today the question is still answered the same. Basically the same as it was then. He said to Cain, Yes, you are. While we are not to judge our brothers and sisters because they answer to God and not to us, Romans 14:12. So then every one of us shall give an account of himself to God. We are responsible for the way our conduct affects others' lives. Someone who is his brother's keeper looks out for and cares for others, even if they are not actually related to him or her. The question is, are you your brother's keeper? When you look in the mirror, remember, we, us, I need your support. I need your help with something. That something is passing this resolution. You're probably wondering why. The answer is, it's the right thing to do. And remember, what makes a person a keeper? Character, kindness, humility, faith, respect, integrity, trustworthiness, responsibility, courage, and compassion. The question is, are you a keeper? Have a wonderful night. I'll see you next time around.
Thank you, Mr. Sheets. Is there anyone else here to speak to any item of old or new business? Again, those are items 11 through 16. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Theresa Omanovich, 197 Apps Road. I'm here to speak again on the resolution of the Commission of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, to acknowledge the continuous gaps in equitable resource distribution to BIPOC communities and reaffirm the commitment to promote housing security, economic empowerment, and youth safety to marginalized communities in Athens-Clarke County. I want to thank Carol for helping Mocha and I with the resolution, and everyone else that has provided input. We are here to support the resolution. And your discussions that you had earlier, all of it affects this resolution in the sense that the resource distribution has been inequitable. So improving that, and hopefully in improving that, you can improve issues in dealing with housing insecurity, youth development, and economic development. If there could be a focus on that, if you could focus on helping low-wage income earners increase their ability to afford to be here. So whatever, Carol was extremely helpful. I look forward to the discussion on this resolution, and also look forward to its making it to consent and pass it on February 4th. And the community is definitely is behind the resolution. So again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Manovich. Is there anyone else here to speak to any of these items? Again, 11 through 16. Evening.
Good evening, Commissioners and Mayor. I've been patient and observant for several years, despite feedback suggesting that nothing would get done. I joined the Commission. Today, I publicly submit my resignation from the HRC, as it has proven to be ineffective in addressing the harms highlighting and evident in the Athens community. It seems it is used only to prolong proper course of action until results aren't yielded. For context, I'm the fourth person to resign in the past year as chairman. I have served as chairman and have witnessed time-wasting sessions and various excuses as to why there's no progress. While I believe everyone is eager to participate within HRC, there seems to be numerous obstacles and barriers preventing the implementation of effective solutions that have proven successful in other cities and counties. This can only lead to discouragement amongst those involved. I remain committed to being the voice of the unheard and unreached people of Athens. The current commission is not in its existing form. The current commission in its existing form perpetuates the disenfranchisement of the very communities. It aims to serve by exclusion of representatives, analysts, etc. It's akin to individuals who aren't impacted attempting to solve the issues faced by the unprivileged, which is both illogical and counterproductive. A commission designed to address injustices cannot be effective without active involvement and input by the victims of these injustices within our Athens community. American freedmen, individuals who were formerly enslaved in the United States, and the descendants must be included in these conversations. I propose that the establishment of a commission focus on these committees within the scope of disparity reports and highlighted victims such as American freedmen. And shouldn't the government seek feedback from affected communities on what they believe are viable solutions? And speaking of solutions, shouldn't the pathway be carved by those impacted rather than those who aren't? Since joining the commission, I've heard from demographics of people who have been unwilling to entertain the necessary conversations to address any of the disparities. For example, in all disparity reports, African-American men and women are victims of discriminatory practices heading to disenfranchisement. How can our issues be addressed if the commission includes communities that are not impacted? There must be a focal point on American freedmen, today racially labeled as African Americans. I am not in support of race-based policies, but remedial policies that specifically target harmed and impacted communities. We haven't and cannot address our issues if harmed people are subsets of other labeled collectives such as minorities, POC, or BIPOC, as these labels are a collective of unimpacted communities with different issues. This leaves a significant portion of American freedmen and harmed communities unaddressed and with an infinite loop of disparity. At this very point, there is not one valid reason to substantiate why harmed communities have been neglected after the intentional disregard of human rights and targeted destruction. I encourage you all to review and consider understanding what we Athens residents have been informing you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Yes.
I just need your name for the record so the clerk can capture
Todd
that.
Lovett.
Thank you,
PO
Mr.
Box
Lovett.
4096.
Thank you. All right. Is
Thank
anyone else here to speak to any old or new business items 11 through 16?
Good night, everyone. My name is Elaine V. Brown. I'm a resident of 216 North Avenue. Many of the other residents were not able to be here tonight. We're a small community, but we're a community nonetheless. I've lived in the Athens area since 2010, and one of the biggest issues that I've seen here is housing and the direct impact that the University of Georgia has on the housing community. Whenever University of Georgia wins a game, the rate for housing escalates exponentially. My question to you guys is this: what are you proposing to counteract the inequities that exist?
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Is there anyone else here to speak to any of the old or new business items? That's 11 through 16. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to discussion of those items. 11 is a held item. This is the response to the recommendations of the Newton Bridge TAD Advisory Committee with their priorities. We had good engagement with staff, and there were good questions at the last meeting, and then subsequently, Commissioners Thornton and Fisher and I met, and what we anticipate is that by the voting meeting, we'll have an amended commission-defined option that has some cost figures associated with the plan. Of course, this is a tax allocation district, so newly developed funds can only be spent in that district and on any of those kind of four categorical areas generally the commission has already identified, whether that's public infrastructure, housing, youth development, or economic development opportunities. So just a quick update on that. Any questions or observations?
No.
Commissioner Thornton?
No, I am glad that you shared that we met. I do think that there was some clarity. And the other thing that you were going to send out was the map with the cost figures to everybody to see the area, to the map.
Absolutely, Commissioner. And Commissioner Thornton is referencing that in addition to the costs that will be associated with the plan for safety and intersection improvements along Newton Bridge Road, we of course have four already funded projects, one that we're going to talk about here in just a minute, that are attached to this: the Vincent Drive sidewalk, the Jefferson River Road multimodal path, the improvements on Chase Street, and of course the Barber Street multimodal path that we talked about some months ago. So I'll distribute to the body a map so that you can see each of those items along with the associated costs and funding streams that are going into those. All right, item 12 is, again, directly connected, and of course, this was under discussion last week in the work session, and this is the Vincent Drive Pedestrian Improvement Project. I do know that staff has done some additional work since the work session, and I don't know if Assistant Manager Saunders, you just want to begin with the analysis that's been done that might be helpful for commissioners to hear on the front end.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So in the work session, we presented a few concepts of how the existing budget could be used, and we heard fairly consistent feedback from those attending the work session that there was an interest in doing more, specifically bringing the sidewalk all the way from Jefferson River Road to Holland Park. So I believe that was concepts 2 and 3 combined. After reviewing that with staff, we've identified that the best source of funding that we would recommend to you, if you would like to do that, would be earned interest from, interestingly enough, SPLOST 18. There is some accrued earned interest within that program. This fits within that. The outstanding projects that we would want to accomplish out of 18 that we kind of have our eye on that earned interest would actually be the Firefly Trail completion. And so if there's general consensus here today, what we anticipate doing is coming back and updating this agenda item to provide an option to do the full options 2 and 3.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it, Andrew. Any questions or observations from members of the body? Commissioner Wright.
No, I appreciate getting that detail coming from staff, because I get uncomfortable when we do commission-defined options with math and costs. And I think it's best when we get that from staff so that it's had that vetting that I think is really important when it's a financial implications there. So thank you for finding some money to talk about. I'd like to see that in the agenda report next time.
Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that as well, but I'd also like to, so, and you might have covered this first, but you mentioned the Firefly Trail needing more funding as well. Were there any other T-SPLOST projects that were in there, or if there are, could you also include mention of them in the revised agenda report so that we know what we're working with to make that decision? And likewise, following up on that, in Facts and Issues 9, you said, it says that when the preliminary design is brought back to the mayor and commission, I'm assuming that means for the section 2, the cost of, or whatever it is, I guess if we go for something else. But it says the cost of construction will be reevaluated and staff will identify areas of construction to move on with or recommend for future phases. So does this imply that when we get to the next stage, these numbers might all increase for all those sections?
Yes, ma'am, it does. So this is at the concept phase, so we're kind of estimating how far our money will go. As we get into schematic design, which is where we're headed with this, we get a better understanding of right-of-way acquisition needs, the amount of pipe and grading that is needed, and so our pencil gets a little bit sharper. So what we would recommend to you, if you're pursuing options 2 and 3 together, is that we would go ahead and dedicate the budget now, have you all allocate that now of what we anticipate needing. And then if we get into the end of schematic design before we go out to bid and we have a sense that we're going to have any further deficits, we would then bring this item forward with further recommendations on funding. On the other hand, if we find a way to complete the project with less money that then is allocated, that money is then available for other uses within the T-SPLOST 18 program.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I think our idea here is admirable in wanting to complete projects, but this is a newer project, and I don't want, we've working on the Firefly Trail for many, many, many years and have many miles of it done, so I don't want to not finish that. Just like we had the arena, we wanted to finish that. So that we want to make sure that, I'd like to know what the options are for those other projects. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of points and a couple of questions and a couple of requests. I would like a copy of the estimate that was comprised to reflect the 46% increase over the original amount. I do understand inflation, but I just heard you say that the response to Commissioner Myers was, I can't read my writing, give me 1 second. This is the schematic design phase, and the next phase is to sharpen the pencil and to put it out to bid. So it seems I mean, I'm a layperson, I don't do this for a living, but it seems backwards. It seems like it would make more sense to get a bid to understand what the true costs are. A 46% increase is significant. And during the work session, I heard that the primary increases were in personnel and just materials. And so between then and now, I had the opportunity to sit with two, I guess they would call themselves construction owners or workers. They own companies, they do construction work, and for different counties. And when I brought up the concept of 46% increase for this project, almost double, they said, materials have not gone up that much. Give me an example. I said, what about concrete? Both of them, and this is not the same meeting, totally separate days. They don't even know each other. They both quoted, concrete is only gone up 23%. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that I like to see the numbers. And so if I could see what was put together to tell us on this agenda item that we're over budget. And then I would also like to understand why we would use this to make decisions on before we even actually send it out to bid. Maybe someone could do it less. And in my own research, I looked at common construction material costs, and for every type of project that consists of this, building a 1.4-mile concrete sidewalk in a residential area, and I literally put in Athens, Georgia. And the general materials, and you know this, concrete, contractors, overhead, the length and width, you have to factor that in of the actual sidewalk, permitting fees, excavation and grading, labor, installation. My question, where are we on, how long do you think this will take to build with our labor challenges? That's one question.
Give me 1 second. I believe the timeline is in the agenda item. To speak a little bit to the escalating costs, you're correct that it is not simply concrete that is driving cost, nor is it simply a sidewalk that is being constructed. So this is a project that involves curb and gutter, it involves storm drainage, it involves crosswalks. So there are a number of factors, but we would be happy to give you more detail on how our estimates changed. And those estimates originated with a citizen-led proposal, a resident-led proposal into a T-SPLOST program. And yes, we provide technical guidance on that. But ultimately, this is about materializing a vision to something on the ground. And to your point, Commissioner, the actual cost will be the cost that this body approves prior to construction. What we're talking about today is whether or not you all want to set aside money so that you can meaningfully move forward to completing that project in a more robust manner as it was intended, or if you would like to direct staff to move forward doing a smaller scale project with the budget resources that were allocated in the T-SPLOST referendum.
Thank you. I do have two more questions, but I just wanted to make sure I heard you say that our vote is based on the estimate prior to construction. Is that right?
What we're working from now is what I would say are big picture estimates.
Okay.
And so they are informed by, programs like RS Means that speak to trends in construction. But at the end of the day, they are but estimates.
Sure.
Once we get into schematics, that's basically engineering. At that point, we're going to have a much better understanding how many linear feet of pipe, what type of grading. That gives us better information to come up with our estimates. And then the last and final truth to this is when it goes out to bid. And when it goes out to bid, we then know what the market tells us it costs to create this sidewalk. And those bids are ones that you all approve. So you will see this item again. And if you all choose to dedicate resources to it in this action so that we can pursue that more robust construction, again, if we come in under what's estimated, that money doesn't get put into bells and whistles or things that you haven't approved. You're either going to approve it for this project or it's going to go and be available for other projects.
Thank you.
And Commissioner, the timeline is found in Facts and Issues, item 13, and so we would be looking at project completion in spring of 2027.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the information. You know, this is my third meeting. I'm learning. You know, this is so different from every person in the history of America. Usually we have a budget before we buy a house. We have a budget before we buy a car. So to say, let's approve a budget and then go find the car, this is what it feels like. But I do have two more quick questions. So on page 4, under number 5, the third bullet, stormwater being handled via impervious fee. And my question is, what is the financial costs associated with stormwater?
And when you say financial costs, like the cost
Or is
to add those upgrades as a part of the project?
Correct.
That's going to be something we'll know more as we get into schematics, but I can certainly work with our staff to follow up with you on email on kind of how those estimates break down.
Okay, and my last one is for the streetlights and utility relocations. Has it been confirmed yet that the utilities need to be relocated? And how many streetlights are on that street that need to be moved? Thank you.
We'll follow up with more information. What I will say is, again, we're working at the concept level. These more precise site level impacts, including if lights are going to be added or moved, those are identified in the schematic design process that you would be authorizing staff to move to with this item.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Commissioner Thornton.
Oh, I got back just in time. And my questions also are in the same lane as cost concerns. And I know these are different questions than we usually ask from commissioners, but my question comes from, one question. Are TAD dollars available for any of these, for any of this? Is TAD dollars available?
So the only portion of this concept that is in the TAD is actually the section that's from the park property east to Newton Bridge Road. I believe that is sub-project or concept 1 in the project.
Okay.
And there is approximately $726,000 in the TAD as of the end of 2024, which relates to the previous item we discussed.
Okay. But by the time this project is finished, there will be more TAD dollars that could be allocated for some of the work. Because I had the same questions also, Commissioner Johnson, and she just asked more eloquently than me. Because it looked like we're buying something ahead. I'll have to figure it out. But you did help me with the TAD dollars. That could be a resource. And I do struggle, and I'll go on record saying it, and I know Commissioner Link is probably going to want to throw something at me. I do struggle with designated project appropriate for public art. We need to take care of the basics, but since it did make the SPLOST thing, I won't gripe about it, okay?
Understand.
Commissioner Link.
I'll speak to the public art first. You know, this project bumps right up against Holland Park, and I feel like, you know, the folks who frequent Holland Park deserve some public art as much as.
Okay.
You know, and I mean, it remains to be seen what the Cultural Affairs Commission will think, but I would bet that they'd aim for something close to Holland Park.
I think they would rather have some sidewalks, but go ahead.
Now I'm having a brain fart. I know what I'm asking. The Firefly Trail completion. Can we get some clarity on exactly what portion of the Firefly Trail those funds might have been intended for and what some alternative funding might be? I know we did just get a notice from Senator John Ossoff's office today about some pedestrian funding grants that might be available, and I would hope that we're pursuing those. So, yeah, if we just get some clarity on what portion of the Firefly might get left behind if we were to fund this project fully.
We will definitely follow up on Commissioner Meyer's request, dovetailing with yours, about what are the SPLOST 18 potential projects that would benefit from supplemental funding from this earned interest. In our discussions with staff, they felt like if you all chose to allocate additional funds for this project, there was still sufficient funds to fully complete the Firefly as it's been approved at your level.
Thanks for that note, Andrew. I'm very interested in seeing both of those projects come to completion, even if it's 2027 when I will be here, but hopefully not in a wheelchair yet. It's really exciting, though, just to think about having a complete sidewalk on Vincent Drive, so any residents from Garnet Ridge or combining the prior project, Rolling Ridge, would be able to access safely Holland Youth Sports Complex. So glad to see that. Just want to ask Commission, we've got 4 items left. Do y'all want to take a break, or do you want to continue with the 4 items?
Keep rolling.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, we're going to move on. All right, 13 is the East Side Library schematic design. You see that illustration in your packet.
Consent? Consent?
Want to see that on consent?
Consent, Carol, consent.
I just want to ask some
Commissioner
questions.
Myers?
Maybe we do need that break.
Good, Carol.
Yeah, I'm not against it going on consent, but I do want to just, I read through all the comments that were made, and I know this project will probably get some attention in the media and such, and there were a lot of comments about the location. Again, well, there were certain repeated questions about the location, so I do want to clarify for everyone a little just history in here that could be read in the history section. But there were 4 sites that we looked at and narrowed things down to. 2 of the sites that a lot of people mentioned on Gaines School Road and Barnett Shoals were not viable ones. We couldn't work something out with the school district. Kroger's didn't give us a good enough deal, that if you all knew the deal they offered us, you wouldn't want us to be taking it. So that's where we were looking at this site at the 1030 Barnett Shoals, which a lot of people are really happy with as well. I will mention, because there were a bunch of people probably coming in, people come into the public comment at different parts of the process and are seeing this green space and are like, this is awful, we're doing something with this green space. And fortunately, Assistant Manager Andrew Saunders was able to give me some background information from a agenda report before I got on the commission when this property was purchased by the county, or I'm not really sure how it all happened. But what was interesting to me was that there were 24 acres that are dedicated, and I may have the numbers of the acres wrong here, on green space in the Greenway and work on the sewer lines, but the remaining 7.35 acres were put aside as a economic zone up there in the front along Barnett Shoals. And interestingly, when I read that a little bit more, it says in that report that, some of you approved, or that agenda item, that if substantial progress was not made in determining the future use of those 7 acres by fiscal year 27, that staff would return to the mayor and commission with a request to sell that. So now we're not going to be selling it. We're going to be using it for this wonderful library. I also wanted to point out that there are some sustainability aspects of the design that we were looking at, green energy components, and in the report we got down that we would be looking at considering those and the cost with them at a later point with money from the SPLOST 2020 Project 11. And would that be, at what point would we be voting on that? Does anyone know, or what part of these many stages would we be considering that?
It can happen as more or less as quickly or as slow as you'd like. What I would encourage you to do is, if you're interested in bringing those items forward, and generally solar goes really well with new buildings because of a variety of factors, energy efficiency, orientation, so on. Same thing with EV chargers. Generally, those things are best done as a part of the main construction. So, for example, on Fire Station 2, we blended some funds to add solar, and we were able to do that under a kind of a master agreement. So what we can do is share some feedback that the commission is interested in seeing, the user group's recommendations. And so if that's taken up at their next meeting, you're looking at about a 90-day turnaround.
Yeah, I would like for that to get start on that process. And on the visual aspects of this, I'm not as much of a designer as some of my colleagues are, so make sure you all look at the color schemes if you have strong comments on this. I did ask a couple of questions. There's a big word library in the front, but that's into the parking lot, not to Barnett Shoals. And I was like, how low or high was that going to be from Barnett Shoals? Was there a need to put something on the side there? That was just a concept. I guess we could come back to that later on, but that was one thing. Probably more, just as important, was the discussion of the traffic light in a crosswalk or some kind of option there. I know I put a T-SPLOST proposal in that was for the higher level crosswalks, but I would like some more information about that, or when we're going to be when we're going to be addressing that, because I know that if people aren't thinking about it now, they will be when we see that construction. So I would like to find out a little bit more about the process for understanding the traffic and the safety issues right in that area.
Commissioner Myers, you just wanted some later response?
Yeah, I want some later. Oh, yeah.
Just
I
wanna
already
kinda plant the
get
seed.
it. I mean, I'm
Just want to make sure you weren't looking for anything right now.
No, I wasn't waiting for the response now. You can, we can get that later on that, unless you have some quick and easy response on that traffic, because, that would be good to get out there, appease people so they don't give us too much trouble on that.
No, we'll follow up. And sorry for the awkwardness. I guess I was waiting for a question.
Yeah. Well, it's late, right? Didn't get that
we
break
do
yet.
lots of opining in this room, but every so often a question lands. So,
Yeah.
Commissioner Davenport?
The process of naming that library, could a commissioner initiate that, or is that community? I can't remember. Okay, never mind. Thank you. And my last question, this is going to be a weird question, but we're past that point of, this is going to be that location, so I'm going to let that be.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, the visuals of the building itself are not included in the public agenda item, are they? Or am I on the wrong agenda item?
That's it.
Yeah. Okay, never mind. I'm looking at the wrong agenda item. I just wanted to make sure it was in the publicly available documents. There it is. Okay. Thank you.
So knowing that there's going to be some follow-up material, do we want to leave this on or off consent?
Let's just leave it off consent so we can get the answers to these questions in a public forum.
All right, sounds good. All right, item 14, next one is the 2025 Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation Grant Program application to support the live stream pipe replacement program. And for the viewing public, live stream pipe replacement are those former streams that now run under roads in pipes that in the version that they were built in the 50s and 60s and 70s occasionally collapse. And we would like fewer collapses, and so we would like some dollars to ensure fewer road collapses. So, commissioners, any questions?
Is it in order that it could be on consent, or is it still waiting?
This could be on consent. Yeah, Commissioner Johnson?
This title got me, it stopped me in my tracks, and it's not very clear, but what you just said was, do you mind giving us 2 to 3 sentences of just context for those watching what this agenda item is about?
So I'll give some high-level context, and Assistant Manager Saunders may want to give some more. So what staff has diligently done over, really about the last 5 years, is an assessment of the number of pipes running under roads that are in some danger of collapse. Some of those pipes can get some remediation even as they exist now. There's some sort of concrete application even for those old corrugated metal pipes that will keep some living for a very long time. Some of those other pipes are really in such a deteriorated shape that the whole road needs to be dug up, and we need a new concrete pipe in place. We have something on the order of $20 million of this work that really ought to be done in the relatively near term. And we even have, and we'll get this for you, Commissioner Johnson, we even have a prioritized set of roads that need to have live streams replaced under them, and the magnitude of cost, rough magnitude of cost for each of those. Okay. So I don't know if System Manager Saunders, you want to add anything more to that?
That's correct. So I think our last analysis showed top-tier projects. We had about 39 pipes under roads that need to be replaced to the tune of $31 million. This agenda item asks for your permission to pursue a $4.8 million grant to whittle that down.
If the county is awarded this grant, would this amount be removed from the T-SPLOST responsibility line item for infrastructure? If it's, because I've heard that in my orientations that to cover the piping and whatnot, but if we're awarded this grant, we could certainly use this and use that funding for something else. Is that on the table?
That'd be for me a question of our sort of engineering and evaluation team. Would this simply sort of go to those sort of lower tier items, or would staff say, hey, we've satisfied the need completely? I guess that's a question that maybe we could follow up on.
Yes, sir. If I'm remembering correctly, what was brought to you for T-SPLOST coming forward 2026 was not that full $40 million backlog. So you would have a choice if we got this grant, if you wanted to use that opportunity to work off the backlog a little more aggressively so that we have lower deficits going forward, or if you wanted to use it to decrease the amount of T-SPLOST 26 investments so that you could accommodate other needs in the community.
Thank you.
Okay with consent? All right. 14 is on consent. Shamika? Nice. All right, 15 is a resolution to address Black, minority, and BIPOC inequities. And I want to thank Commissioners Fisher and Davenport and Myers, all of whom worked on this in conjunction with community members. I don't know if commissioners who were here, who had a hand in this, wanted to make any notes.
I'll let Commissioner Myers start.
Well, I just want to say that this is, this is something that originated with the public and was submitted to us, as we heard tonight in the comments. I worked with the commissioners, Davenport, Dexter Fisher, Melissa Link, and then just was talking the other day here with Commissioner Thornton on this, reached out to all the commissioners. And really, my role was just a role I brought as someone who's spent almost 30 years teaching writing and communication skills and could spend a few hours working on this. So it's fits my skill set, taking a document and working on it. And basically, I see this as a recommitment to the work that we've been doing. That's spelled out in the whereas part. And this is a specific focus on addressing needs that have to do with housing, housing, youth force and youth and workforce, and especially in the Black and minority communities, and really talks about, reviews what we've done and recommits ourselves to doing that as we move forward. This captures a moment in time, and it captures an intent. It is something that would need to be followed through by this commission. But one thing that I've just thought of recently, and when I opened up our strategic goals I could probably go through and find all the places where this overlaps with our strategic goals, just starting with our first one about being good neighbors, working to create and implement systems to identify, acknowledge, and address racism, trauma, harm, and violence in our community. Just going to the second goal of identify and close gaps in the community, prepare to develop tools and relationships to increase awareness of and access to Athens workforce and workplace development opportunities. And I could continue to go through there. So I don't think it's a departure from our strategic goal. I think it's taking our focus that we've been working on in the last couple of years, many years, and read the whereas part in there. And so I was glad to be able to put some time into the reshaping of this to include that history and recommit ourselves in this direction. So I was happy to be a part of this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Davenport?
Yeah, leave it off consent, because I believe a lot of people in the public will want to comment on it.
Absolutely. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I want to thank Commissioner Myers for kind of taking the initiative on this, and Commissioner Davenport and I sat down with her, and it was kind of a walk down memory lane, recognizing all the efforts we've made, and even the 10 or so years since I've been on the commission, and given the opportunity to kind of reinvigorate our commitment to these efforts. It was also an opportunity to go through the ARPA journey and all the funding that we've designated, trying to make some progress towards alleviating inequities. Of course, as much progress as we've made, there's way much more to go. And, at this moment in time, when we see, our federal government and the president initiating executive orders that effectively slash and burn 60-plus years of civil rights and racial equity efforts, it's more important than ever that we take a look at what we're doing and what we can do here in our own front yards to overcome that and, continue on our march towards progress and maybe go a little bit farther. These are going to be some really, really tough years. We're not going to have access to the funding that we've had in the past, and ARPA aside, even other funding is going away. So we're going to have to get really creative if we're going to continue on this journey. And I ask the public to follow through with any efforts you can to appeal to governing bodies that have way more power than we do in seeing to it that we can alleviate these historic inequities and overcome those challenges.
Commissioner Johnson.
I did some reading earlier, and I've had conversations. Although I did not assist with writing, I did assist with context. I remember all of these actions and some of the things like these wish list actions. Resolutions are, you said opine, resolutions are opinions, and ordinances are things that you really want to happen. Rules, policies, procedures, regulations. I don't have a problem with people being treated kindly. I don't have a problem with everybody being treated with respect. I love it when I don't pick up on any hint of discrimination. But a resolution, you said yourself, I think every single person behind the rail has said it themselves. They're useless. The person that used to sit here, former Commissioner Jesse Houle, said it every single meeting. The resolutions are useless. If this is what you really want and you work so hard for, why not create an ordinance and figure out how to do it? It is possible. I researched state law all day this afternoon. You can do this. The Inclusion Office was started because of the hard work of an organization. But we've had 4, maybe 5 inclusion directors in a very short period because they have not been allowed to do their job, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now people are asking the question, what do they really do? These people are so qualified, we hired them. They came from another community because they wanted to build up our diversity, equity, inclusion in Athens, Georgia. It was new. So they wanted that to be their legacy. Every single person left quickly because they were not allowed to do their job. So a resolution allows them to not allow them to do their job. This is going to be forgotten about. There are so many things that have been accomplished. But if you're not doing this every day, if you don't have something to go back and say there's a policy or procedure or regulation, I support everything in here, but I think it's useless to continue to promote resolutions. Let's just get off of that.
And Commissioner, just in terms of the way that a resolution sequences with other work that the government does, one of the things we do, of course, on an annual basis is allocate funds, most notably through the annual budget, sometimes through other programs like SPLOST and T-SPLOST that's under development now. I would not think it was fair to say that those who were in that department didn't have the opportunity to do things.
I've had conversations.
Commissioner, I will recognize you in a moment.
I'm so sorry, I apologize.
But what I would say is that while it is a relatively new entity, and others that I've engaged with in other communities that have opened inclusion offices for the first time have said that it's those first few years that are the most challenging because of a very wide field of work that has to be done. You have to somewhat decide, which of those things are going to happen and in which sequence. One of the great opportunities we have tomorrow is to work on the strategic plan, and it is those strategic plan elements that then become embedded in ordinance and become funding items as we develop the budget. So they all play together. I think if one was to do a resolution alone, it would be the case that it would be somewhat empty as a gesture. But when those resolutions are coupled with funding, and when those resolutions then become part of strategic planning items, then they become more meaningful. But it's an entry gate, it's a foundation. So, Commissioner Thornton.
I wasn't even going to speak to this tonight. I agree with Commissioner Johnson. I think I'm almost, and I'm not going to call nobody's name out because I don't want to embarrass you, but there have been several commissioners right here that are still here that wouldn't even want to sign the Athens Black Lives Resolution in 2025. There are commissioners right here that didn't support the efforts that a lot of the black organizations or black representation have done. I loved reading it because it reminded me of what was supposed to happen that didn't happen. So I remember when we had our retreat at Thomas Lake Park, and I brought up the executive order of, what's the man? Man ain't been gone that long, I forgot his name. President Biden. President Biden did the executive order, and I went to the bathroom and came back, and they were laughing about it, talking about change the name. How do you change the name of an executive order? I'm like, these comments should have come with the past commission. Y'all should have somebody should have put us in check 5 years ago. Like I said, I'm not calling nobody's name out, but there are things that are written in this resolution that some of y'all voted against, or you didn't support. So without calling names, I'm agreeing. I think that if we're serious, let's get serious with ourselves and do the right thing. I know everybody's interest is not the same. I understand that. We all have opinions. But when we had two groups, well, three. They got the largest amount of ARPA money. and all of them got shamed down without no real proof. You can't say one thing and put it in a resolution and then think it's going to be okay. So we should be ashamed that we didn't do what we were supposed to do, that a group of people have to come back and remind us what we said we were going to do. But it's not fair to the new commissioners that have come on board. This was a responsibility to the past commission, mayor, and commission. So and then we heard it tonight with the young man speaking, resigning from HRC. The man resigned, and he was bold enough to come and tell us why. Yeah, these are just words, so all of it, y'all can feel good about yourself, but when it comes to action and getting things done, we're still begging.
Commissioner Johnson.
Mr. Mayor, I did not mean to interrupt you earlier. I apologize. I do feel passionate about this because I struggle to be gray. And if you believe in something, and it sounds like so many of you do, why not go down the path of searching out an ordinance? I have an outline. I literally did state law research today on how to do this, and it's not challenging. We already have so many supporters, but I wanted to provide some context. I've had conversations with our prior DEI officers. Those individuals were respected. They already had experience. And then they get to Athens, where it's a place to, to establish a legacy, and they are not allowed to do their job. I heard that. It's very frustrating when you are hired to do something and that's your chosen field, and then you're not allowed to do it because no one really wants you to do it. I would welcome anyone to contact somebody, or maybe look up an exit interview, whatever it's called when you leave the company or organization. But the housing and homeless, there's a comment in here, a paragraph about affordable housing investment strategy. We have no more single-family homes for low-income and moderately income individuals in Athens, Georgia, as Commissioner Taylor stated earlier. And also, as the Housing and Community Development Director shared with me during my new commissioner orientation, the number one priority is that demographic, but the outcomes data does not show it. The money that is given out and spent or awarded to agencies for rehabbing or doing other things, it's not for affordable housing for low-income and moderately income individuals. The disparity study, it tells on itself. A resolution is not going to fix or address any of those issues. We're going to be talking about this next year. Number 4, the Title VI coordinator. We do not have anybody on staff that is actively doing that role. And I keep saying that because as long as we continue to accept dollars from GDOT, we are out of compliance. At one point, at one day, someday, maybe not today, the rubber is going to hit the road, and they're going to recall that. That is a real position that we are required to have. And the Title VI coordinator ties directly into everything that's in here. And the last thing is the young man that spoke about the Human Relations Commission. I've seen him out and about. He's a hard worker. He really wants to be engaged in the community, but as he said, I already knew 4 people. I thought it was 4 before him, but he said he's the 4th. In just 12 months. And I talked to the first 3. They were not allowed to do anything. They had great ideas. They had great suggestions. They were always discouraged. What are we trying to accomplish? We don't need to feel good. If you care about it and you believe in it, I would like us to segue the action of this to an actual ordinance, more so than a resolution. And we don't, if anyone says we need a resolution just to get in the door, we don't. We really don't need a resolution to get in the door. We've seen how resolutions have turned out over the years. We've forgotten about them.
Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, I just want to remind us all that this was a resolution that was brought to us from the community. It was not something that the commissioners came about, just like the resolution that we passed for the LGBT community was something that came from the community. Second of all, there's many things in the whereas part that actually were ordinances and weren't funding allocations that we decided on. It is our responsibility as commissioners to follow through here. So we're putting this through here. Yeah, I spent a couple hours on it. We're putting it through. It ties into our strategic plan, and our strategic plan, by the way, which they're working on tomorrow, is not an ordinance. It is an intention. We do a lot. We have to have an intention. Our former committee, county manager, interim county manager, who just left us, was always saying, "What's our why? You guys got to get a vision together." This is part of the vision. So I am glad that our community brought it to us. I'm committed to keep working on it, and I appreciate any ideas that we all have can work on together, separate in coalitions to move more specifics forward. That's what we're here for. That's why we were elected. So anyway, a resolution is not the end. A resolution is the beginning. And this is actually a continuation of the beginning.
Commissioner Davenport?
Yeah, next, in 2 weeks, I'll be making a recommendation to approve this resolution. This was brought to us by individual and a group of people in the community right around Christmas. And I got an email literally earlier this week. It's been a long week, stating that maybe we need to do an ordinance. If it is in this body's, intent, if you want to do make an ordinance, please consult with our county attorney and do so. We can't beat each other up and ridicule the effort and the work of people who work really hard, who did their due diligence from the people of the community, literally told us, work together, and then, at the end, it's a shame. We are in charge of our BACs, period. If HRC is having an issue, guess whose responsibility that is? Every single one of us behind this rail. So any criticism that is given to this body should be directed towards us, whether you're new or whether you're old. Because it's our responsibility to make sure that the people we elect and people we select, and even when it comes to staffing, that people are doing their job. Now, the former commissioner of District 6 did say that we have some issues with HRC. I'm not going to deny that. We had discussion. It was kind of late in the field and late in the game, but we gotta. I get people want the jeers and the likes on Facebooks and all that stuff, but we worked really hard on this and we communicated back and forth for over a month. It was even over New Year's and over Christmas. And I thank Commissioner Myers because she took the lead on this. And I've seen other resolutions like the 100% renewable that were built into T-SPLOST project, that were built into SPLOST project. I've seen the Black Lives resolution literally give us retribution to people on Pettit Road. There are other resolutions that we have also passed in the past, because a resolution is a statement of this body of how we're going to move forward, how we're going to treat people in our community. So I just say, I will be voting on supporting this. If anyone behind this rail who want to work on the ordinance, work with our county attorney, and let's move it forward. But this is a great start, and there are a lot of accomplishment that's literally put into this. Of our stated goals are some of the things that we have accomplished over the past, and I'm very proud of that. And anyway, but thank you for your time, Chairman.
Commissioner Johnson and then Link.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Davenport said I could address him directly. Would that be appropriate?
Well, any comments from the body or through the chair? So if you'd address me regarding anything you want to address regarding
thank you so much.
Resolution.
My comments are not personal to anybody back here. Yes, thank you so much for the hard work that you think you did. I just started in this seat on January 7th. But had I been a commissioner last month, I would have probably contributed to this exact document, because I don't disagree with the document. What I'm saying is I disagree with the perpetuity of the document. If that was lost on somebody, I apologize. I certainly am not here to criticize any hard work that anybody's doing. I spoke to the individuals, everybody outside of this body, but everybody out in that body and everybody watching. I've worked with a lot of people myself. This person who initiated this, I've spoken with that person multiple times. I wasn't a commissioner then, and I wasn't interested in stepping on toes. It's worthy of approval if that's what you want to do. I'm only suggesting give it teeth. The comment about we have a strategic plan. Well, let me share with you a very short story, 7 seconds. During my new commissioner orientation, number one strategic goal is to have good neighbors. I asked 7 different department directors in 2024, from September to October. What does that mean to you? No one had the same answer. We are not clear, is what I'm saying. Resolutions aren't clear. Resolutions are opinions, and that's all I'm saying. I'm not criticizing one individual at all. I recognize hard work, but the order is not to go to the attorney's office and say, do it. It is to do it, and then ask them if is it correct. Should the body agree to it? I think Judd has corrected me more than enough times to know that that's the order that we get work done. But if it came off like I was criticizing somebody, I'm criticizing the process, but not a person. I sincerely don't have an issue with an individual. It's more so I'm reading through things that I would like to see put into action in a much. Explain Title VI, explain this, explain that. We need answers for ourselves, and we don't have them for some things.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I just want to draw attention to the therefores in here, which include housing security, economic empowerment for Black-owned and minority businesses, youth safety development, oversight, and community collaboration. The first 3 of those, we put a lot of effort in our ARPA process into initiating programs that would meet those, begin to achieve the ideals that are stated in this resolution, and handed out lots of money to a lot of organizations that deal with our minority community. But it's the 4th one, oversight and community collaboration, that I think that we really need to focus on if we're to truly meet the ideals that this resolution embodies. And yes, we do have issues with our Human Relations Commission and our Inclusion Office or People and Belonging Office. And that's where we have to step in. And we need to recruit people to that body that truly reflect the community that they're trying to help and represent. And I don't know how we do it, but we also have our People and Belonging Office, and maybe we need to redirect their efforts into reaching further into that community and having more direction from that community on how we achieve those other 4 or other 3 therefores. I feel like this body, as elected officials, we need to do better in getting folks from a diversity of our community on these bodies that we go through these board and commission interviews 2-3 times a year. It's very time consuming, but we really need to do better with recruitment. And I think that's some of the work that we really need to do. We got a lot of things started, and a lot of balls are rolling, and a lot of balls are in the air. we need to commit to seeing to it that those things keep up. Where we get the funding for all that remains to be seen as we move forward. But that fourth, therefore, that takes just simple effort and outreach into the community and invitations to the community. So that's my final word on this.
All right, one item left. Item 16 is an intergovernmental agreement related to establishing a partnership for development of the Arena District and parking needs for the Classic Center Periphery. And just to frame this in a little bit of relatively recent history, we know, of course, we have open now the Akins Ford Arena on the Classic Center campus. We're very happy that that's been a successful launch, but at least a very large portion of the funding for that has always been intended to be derived from private development that would surround the arena. And that's the model that most cities have used in arena and stadium development, at least dating back to the Inner Harbor of Baltimore, say in the earlier mid-'90s. So that's kind of a pretty common model. We know we've had some challenging efforts to get some of that private development off the ground, but as certainly I've borne witness to, and I think probably other people have experienced, sometimes even a difficult birth can bring a beautiful child, and I think that's what we're going to end up seeing here too. The model that you have in front of us, just want to thank the Attorney's Office with, and I'll outline a couple of major components of this. One of those is that it cleans up a lot of the very, very, very many small slivers of property that have been sort of moved over time into two main property components, one of which is essentially the core Classic Center operational campus that's encompassed by the convention center, the arena, and the theater, and the attendant parking for that. And then the other component of which is essentially that area for new development, where we'll see some new economic vitality that not only will contribute to repayment of those bonds that are coming due for the Classic Center Arena construction, but also are, of course, going to be the TAD revenues that are going to accrue to East Athens to a great degree. What this sets up is a steering committee that really takes into account stakeholders of the vitality and the economic opportunity for downtown. So it would include 2 Downtown Development Authority board members, 2 county commissioners, 2 Classic Center Authority board members, and myself as chair. And what this would allow is really the Classic Center to be that operational titan that we've known it to be, and really focus on those day in, day out operational needs of that facility, and really put what you think of as almost the commercial real estate function into the committee that would then flow through a development facilitator, as it's termed here. So that's it in an overview. Certainly, the sooner we get this off the ground, the sooner we begin to attract those private developments that will both repay the bonds and create some TAD revenue for the district. We've had the great benefit of engaging with some other public authorities like the World Congress Center and learned a lot from them. And so I hope this is something that commissioners can support so that we can do our diligence for the public at large. But certainly glad to answer any questions about this. Judd's office was key in putting this together as well, and so if you have some questions about some of the legal components, we could go over those. Commissioner Johnson.
I just really quickly have a question, and I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Instead of the Classic Center repaying their own bonds with their own revenue generated from their own activities, this would actually seek someone else to pay their revenue bonds.
So a little bit different than that.
Okay.
So it always was the case that private development on exactly this land would repay those bonds. This would just put the selection of the development sort of in this multi-entity body rather than just the Classic Center. So we're really doing the same thing, but we're not making the Classic Center the real estate agent. We're having somebody independent to do that with multiple parties around the table.
Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, submitted some of these questions earlier this week, and perhaps you have answers for them now. Maybe we still need some more time, but I did want to bring them up. I read this really carefully because this is a big thing we're dealing with, and the arena, which I had the opportunity to visit on the gala night on Sunday night, is beautiful. People are happy with it, but we still have to pay the bills for it and the bond for it. So as Commissioner Johnson pointed in her question, and your response made it clear that we're not we're just changing who's running the property development, the profits from which will be used to pay the bond. Is my understanding of this. And so that makes sense. But this new Arena District Partnership and Steering Committee, I forget what's the right name for it now?
Steering committee, yeah.
Okay. A really key component of that is that there's going to be a development facilitator. And that's in the definition. And I guess one of my questions, and this might be a legal question, is does it need to be specified in that document that the Arena District Partnership stakeholder group will be hiring this facilitator? Because it doesn't actually say that. It just actually.
Yeah, I looked at your questions. I think that was the intent, that they would select the entity, but I think it's good to clarify that, or.
Right. I mean, that seems like a really big responsibility, and it needs to be more clear in there. I think also, I read something online where people thought, oh, this is great, we're going to have this entertainment district, it's going to, it could be a long time developing, and I'm like reading and I'm going, well, we actually have these bonds to pay. So I would like to see some timeline in there that's anticipated that this development facilitator will be doing it. But am I correct also in that this Arena District Partnership group will be the ones who are hiring and putting out the request to? Are they going to have to put out a request?
Well, we talked about, at the discussion that we had when Nikki was here, that, our staff might facilitate doing that perhaps. We didn't get into that was kind of the thought. We could put more detail around that. I mean, it'd be our staff or the Classic Center Authority staff, and it didn't seem like there was at the time, a lot of support for the.
Well, I mean, I think we're doing this in reaction to the fact that we're not satisfied with the present situation.
Right.
And so I want to make sure that our new situation.
We had discussed, and I can add that detail in here, that our staff would do that, would facilitate issuing the RFP. That's what I thought we discussed, Mr. Mayor, correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. We would have our finance department and other professionals carry that out.
I'd just like to have that all spelled out on that. The other thing is with the sectioning of the map, and maybe I'm missing something but sections 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the map that's in this agenda report are these little pieces, but it's the airways and the little slivers. And I'm a little confused on this because I know that these parts were part of the developer that was, the contract with whom was released, that terminated last summer. So is the plan here that the Classic Center Authority would still retain the ability to develop those areas, because that's where the arcade was going to be and so forth? Are they going to still be doing money-making?
Yeah, what the agreement says on Section 2 is that we would establish what's referred to as the Arena District, and the Arena District consists of both the orange area and the blue area. The orange area is denoted as the Classic Center campus, and the blue area is the district development sites.
Right.
And so in Section 2, it says, Unified Government, the Classic Center Authority, and the Athens Downtown Development Authority do hereby establish a partnership to be known as the Arena District Partnership for the purpose of governing all private sector to commercial development activities involving the Arena District, which is everything shown in blue and orange.
Oh, okay.
And Commissioner,
including but not limited to apartments, condos, hotel, restaurants, and retail, and the parking needs for the Classic Center Periphery. Any public improvements to the Classic Center campus, which is the orange area, that do not involve private sector commercial development activities, including but not limited to facade improvements, ingress and egress modifications, parking and plaza upgrades, will continue to be governed by the process set forth in the 2028 lease agreement as amended and not subject to review by the Arena District Steering Committee. And what that lease agreement as amended would provide is that it would just come to the commission, the public improvements. They wouldn't go to the Arena District Steering Committee.
Is that clear, Commissioner?
Yeah, not quite, because it's all complicated, but the development before included some of those orange things that
It
are in the
did.
Classic
That's
Center and
correct.
some of the blue things.
Before, just the Classic Center Authority had authority basically over everything in orange and blue.
So I guess I'm saying in this new setup, could we have a developer that uses some of the orange slivers and the blue?
We certainly
Yes.
could, yeah,
Okay,
but we
that's
wanted
what
to
I
make it
wasn't clear
clear
about.
that
Yes.
the kinds of things that you have sort of in the public realm, like facades or canopies over the
No,
building.
no,
Yeah.
I'm fine
and
with
those
that.
kind
The
of things
private
would-
development looks at, pertains to what's referred to as the Arena District. In the Arena District, see at the top it says Arena District?
Right, right.
Consists, and it's defined in here, in the whereases, the Arena District consists of both the district development sites, which are shown in blue, and the Classic Center campus, which is shown in orange. Is that,
I'll read that part again.
Okay,
That's-
yeah.
That'll help me in my rereading.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Attorney Drake, was there another point you wanted to make?
That's the point.
Okay, Commissioner Wright and then Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for getting this on the agenda so we can move forward in the new year with this. And I wanted to be clear, and I might have missed it in the agenda item, will you be concluding the Arena Bond Oversight Committee?
It's terminated here.
It is within there, okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure that was tidied up as well. But it is very complicated, and you guys have done a great amount of work to get this to where we can approve it, to make some more decisions and move forward with that. And, you know, knowing that we're doing that as well as manager search, we've got a lot going on as a team. So I hope as a team tomorrow in our retreat, we can set some priorities and not dilute ourselves with too much.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I'm glad to see this moving forward. And I'm glad I haven't given it a thorough read, but, you know, conceptually, the idea of having the ADDA, the Unified Government, and the Classic Center Authority all involved in this district moving forward, I think increases the accountability and the transparency, and know that this body appoints people to both the ADDA and the Classic Center Authority. So this body, which is accountable to the voting public, you know, ultimately will have much say in how this entire end of downtown moves forward. I don't believe the public is fully aware of what's to come and the whole financing scheme that allowed the arena to be built. You know, that arena is being built based on, you know, future pipe dreams of condos and hotels rising from the ground all around it. Those will be paying off the bonds that paid for the arena. So it's essential that they move forward in a way that the public, you know, deems appropriate or that we as an elected body are comfortable with. So I'll be giving this a thorough read, and I'll let y'all know if I have any questions.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, I thought I read it somewhere, but I can't find it. The user group members, you had mentioned them. Who are they for the new term?
So,
Or is it in here and I just didn't?
so it just notes that there'd be 2 Downtown Development Authority members, 2 county commissioners, 2 Classic Center Authority board members, and the mayor.
It's in section 4, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
All right, just before we depart, need to make sure everybody knows that we have underway now a SPLOST planning group for SPLOST 2026. I just want to make sure the public knows that that work is now underway. And note very quickly the membership of that group. So that includes Kristen Morales, Isabel Scott, Brian Gomez, Nell Warnes, Antoine Stevens, William Breeding, Melissa Darden, Shawanda Johnson, Spring Turner, Rashi Malcolm, John Kopek, Jeb Bradbury, Carrie Rivers, Alex Sams, Don Nepeth, Lamar Johnson, Liz Lozey, Randy Halstead, Jeffrey Benjamin, Carl Blunt, Stephen Wright and Paul Dorsey, with Alex Sams chairing. So they are now taking all of those submissions that we've gotten both from staff and the public since that has closed, and they're going to be putting it in a T-SPLOST smoothie for us all to drink down in May 2026. So we're looking forward to that. Commissioner Davenport?
Who's feeding us tomorrow?
That's a good question. We will have some Barbaritos lunch for those meat eaters and non-meat eaters alike. All right. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right. Got a motion to adjourn from Commissioner Wright, second from Commissioner Myers. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone.